looks like I was muted, but this is Radio Free Mormon, episode 444, Mormon Truth Bombs. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the seminal episode of RFM, and I mean that in a nice way. It is episode 444. That only happens once in a podcaster's career, so it's an exciting night. We're having a party tonight. Not just me, but you two, and we have some special guests at the party. We have my esteemed co-counsel, Colby Reddish. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, RFM. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, it looks like you cleaned up for this show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I look great.
You're looking very nice. I mean that.
Ah, thank you. I wore my best flannel just for you.
I love that flannel. Everybody loves that flannel. Flannel has become associated with you.
Yeah.
I think that you could open a flannel store and do well for yourself.
Oh, that's a good idea. exmoflannels.com.
Yes, Colby Rando Flannels. That's
Rando's flannels. That's right.
Rando's flannels. It's not easy to say, but believe me, they look great and they feel better. And also we have Dr. Randall Bell. We've got 3 doctors on the show tonight. Can you imagine?
Howdy.
How are you doing, Randy?
Hey, okay.
It's good to see you.
It's good to be seen and to see you. Thank you.
Okay, I think we about beat that horse to death.
Yep.
However, the reason that we're here tonight is because we've gotten done, haven't we? Colby, I should let Colby go ahead and talk. Colby, tell the folks why we're here tonight.
We're here to recap our 62 plus hour diatribe on the Light and Truth letter. Recently we were all together at St. George Thrive, and Randy and I were talking about a number of the different episodes. I always enjoy having a chance to talk to Randy. So I said, hey, when we're doing our kind of finale special and we have live call-ins, why don't we have Randy join us? So we invited him to class up the place. That's for sure.
And Randy has been a huge fan. He hasn't exactly been a cheerleader, but he has been a yell king. And he's listened to all these episodes, or at least so he says. And then he went back and he listened to them all again in preparation for tonight's show. And he made notes because he thinks it's such a substantial contribution to apologetic deconstruction. Is that right, Mr. Bell?
Well, that's kind of right. But I will say that with you two, take billing rates for attorneys, 62 hours, do the math. There's easily 6 figures of time put into this series as I see it. So I think our community owes you guys a great debt of gratitude.
Randy, I didn't invite you here to make me question all my life decisions, okay?
You know, it's like I could have made some money doing something, profitable instead of wasting all this time doing this dumb podcast. But this is the $6 million podcast. I'll up it to 7 digits.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, that's what I just said is absolutely true. Leave it like it. But anyway, I'm excited to talk about this stuff because it was a really dynamic series. It was fun to watch. It was informative. And frankly, in spite of a few things I have nice to say about Austin Fife, I think it was all pretty much dismantled.
It was. And then thrown into the wood chipper.
Yeah.
So let's look at tonight's show. By the way, I forgot to put my sign on behind me. It's not broken, but I just forgot to put that one on. Everything else is on except for that. Here we have the thumbnail. Now, this may look a little different than the thumbnails that you've seen me create. If so, there's a reason. Mind explaining that, Colby?
Because I created this one. So, when RFM and I were talking about doing this episode originally, I don't know where I really landed on an homage to Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. But because we were talking about using AI to go through all of our response transcript, because there's just so much information. I did not listen to all of them again in preparation for tonight's episode, but I did review the transcripts with help of my computer assistant. And so I thought it was a good name here, Truth Bombs, How RFM Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Computer, because we're going to use AI to pick up some interesting little tidbits and data points about both the Light and Truth letter and then the response series. So I thought this homage to Kubrick's film and also kind of fits with the whole theme of how some people are really afraid or hesitant about AI. Frankly, I kind of understand exactly why, but it is also a very useful tool. So that's our introduction today.
As long as it remains the tool and does not become the master.
That's right.
Okay, well, you're going to have to sell me on this because I'm still not convinced, but we'll have to see. Okay?
Okay,
And maybe there's some people out there who need convincing as well.
Let me get some audience bets here. Who thinks that RFM quoted Shakespeare more than I quoted Christopher Hitchens during the course of this response series?
Well, does it count when you keep saying the same quote from Christopher Hitchens over and over again?
They are different quotes, sir.
That's like if I said to be or not to be 100 times. That's not really fair, is it?
They're different quotes.
Okay. I believe they just sound all kind of the same to me. That's what it is.
That's true.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're having a lot of fun, and I hope you are too. Let's proceed. Did you already want to dwell on this slide anymore?
No, I've already explained this, just so that people who aren't familiar with the homage understand where it came from.
I do that a lot, and I anticipate my slides because I created the slides, and then I start talking about it. And now I'm 3 slides in, and I haven't clicked to the slides.
Mm-hmm.
What is the Light on Truth letter? Colby, tell us.
Yeah, so here I had it illustrated as like a bizarro version of the CES letter, and they're fighting each other because the Light and Truth letter really was based off of taking the same format, the same kind of easy to read nature of the CES letter, and basically doing the same thing in reverse.
And the same backstory. He stole the backstory too.
That's true. So this was just my intro to the Light and Truth letter, because we're also streaming this to my new small channel. So for people who weren't familiar with where, this 62-hour podcast project that we've done, I thought I would give them just an introduction to this apologetic work.
Can you talk a little bit about it here? I want to give you a chance to plug your new show, Colby.
Sure. Well, it's just called Let's Disagree. It's a place for kind of having some of these conversations. It's not specific to talking about Mormon apologetics or Mormonism, but it's just a space for interesting conversations. And the last video I did last week talked about some critical thinking, epistemological basics. I know that's a big talking point that Randy and I have talked about a number of different times. So going through some commonly used fallacies, and we'll go through some of those tonight as well as we've done throughout the rest of this series. But yeah, it's Let's Disagree and other interesting conversations with me. So,
and there's your little your next to mine, your, what would you call it, your logo?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's Disagree. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's go to the next slide. What is the Light on Truth response series?
Yeah. So this series spanned 20 different episodes, and it was obviously responding to Austin Fife's Light and Truth letter that examines both the historical claims and the reasoning that Austin used throughout his letter. Rather than responding only to individual evidentiary claims, the series systematically evaluates the letter's arguments through a lens of logic, epistemology, and historical context. I think that's been part of what's made it so interesting for me, RFM, is that we have had such a dedicated space to have interesting conversations about a lot of these things and these data points. We've obviously looked at the number of different fallacies that Austin's used, the same fallacies that he decried in his first chapter. Randy, what do you think about that? When someone writes a book and they start out calling out fallacious, bad arguments, would you expect them to use those arguments throughout the rest of their book?
Well, that theme came through loud and clear in the whole series, and it wasn't just once. It was a consistent thing. And I think, frankly, to start off the whole conversation, we have to acknowledge the brilliance, the genius in renaming it the Light on Truth letter, because I think it kind of captures that and other themes throughout the whole thing. So thank you, RFM, for that.
You're welcome. Well, the first one I did on it, which is over a year ago, when I did it on the one on just the financial stuff about the church, he had one chapter on that, and I looked at it to see if he covered what he did with the SEC scandal and how he dealt with it. The answer was he didn't. He didn't mention it at all in that. And so, and then I did an episode on it, and I wasn't familiar with the book enough to even call it the Light and Truth letter. I kept calling it the Truth and Light letter.
That's true. I forgot about that.
Yeah, the inmates over at Psych Ward Radio made merciless fun of me for that while not touching any of my actual arguments. So they taught me how to say it right, and that's what clicked it. Of course, it's the Light and Truth letter. It's the Light on Truth letter. So I owe that to Psych Ward Radio.
Well, then gratitude all the way around, because I think it made the whole series fun in my mind.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I believe in giving credit where it is due. So we'll go back to this. And did you want to continue with this? I'm going to leave the screen for just a second. You continue reading, Colby. Okay.
I've got the thumbnail of the first episode here, and then the thumbnail of the last episode here. And I think the one thing I wanted to get out here is, again, it represents 62 hours of recording, and the transcripts from those episodes represent between 250 and 2,800 written pages, like the transcript of RFM and I speaking. Altogether, the series has about 300,000 views total. Obviously, a lot of those are going to be the same folks. I think the average is about 15,000 an episode. There is some delicious irony to me in this, Randy, that most people probably know about the Light and Truth letter from it being completely dissected by RFM and I, rather than reading it, the way Austin Fife intended. There's kind of a...
I think really you added a lot of awareness to the Light on Truth letter because of the series, and the series is huge. 62 hours of broadcast time. That's just gigantic. And I think that's good, because I think there's a lot to be exposed and a lot to be discussed. And if this is the best the apologists got, I think I'm wearing the right jersey.
The other... Oh, go ahead, RFM.
I knew the apologists did not have a good case, but I didn't realize how bad it was until I went through this with a fine-tooth comb and Colby.
The other thing that's really interesting to me when it comes to other apologists is so many of the believing podcasters have platformed Austin and allowed him to come on and talk about his book. And it's interesting that there's been absolutely no pushback on serious errors in his research and the way he's written the letter, which suggests to me that none of them have actually read it, chapter by chapter, line by line, like, I don't know, RFM and I have. So
yes, I don't think they have. I think they are the true cheerleaders for anything that supports the church, regardless of how badly researched and or written it might be. Did you want to say anything else about this particular slide, Colby, or any other comments you have, Dr. Bell?
I'm good.
Good. Okay. Good. What is the purpose of another episode, i.e. this episode right now on the Light and Truth letter?
Yeah, so we're going to allow people to call in and discuss their experience with the Light and Truth letter. That's one of the reasons we've got Randy here to help us respond. We're going to summarize kind of the entire response series and talk about apologetics more generally. RFM did a great episode about God of the Gaps type arguments and conspiracy thinking that I wanted to share some thoughts on that I had. And I think, Randy, you had some thoughts on that too. So I'd be interested to get your perspective on it. And obviously, we're going to share some fun data points that we've pulled using AI. And last but not least, the most important, it is fun. It is fun to talk about the Light and Truth letter, because this has been a monumental project for RFM and I think it deserves a little bit of celebration, if I say so myself.
It's one of those things we never would have done if we'd known how difficult it was going to be or how long it would take us. Do you think Tikla and Austin appreciate our efforts as much as, I don't know, Dr. Bell? What do you think, Randy?
I don't think they have 7 pages of notes on it like I do. There's a constant theme through these apologetics. And I noticed the other day, Colby, you had mentioned you had some Facebook debates with Brian Hales, and so have I. And whether it's him or these Austin Fife or the others, they just do not engage with the core issues. They refuse to come to the table and debate. I will give the Midnight Mormons a little bit of credit for the fact that they showed up in one debate that, of course, RFM did. And, I was a front row fan of that one. And I think you smoked them. And I think that sent a message that just don't debate. I mean, we saw that recently with you, Colby, and Jacob Hansen. So I think that I think the apologists are just waking up to the fact, both through the Midnight Mormon thing and the thing you just did, Colby, that their arguments are so weak, they simply don't bring them to the table. And they'll call you a liar, and you say, great, I'm a liar. Show me the lie. And they don't show up with an answer, ever.
Mm-hmm. No, they're busy exactly scaring other people.
Yeah, so you're exactly right.
I'm so sorry, Colby.
I was just going to say, you're exactly right, Randy. And the way I say it a lot of times, to be really short and blunt about it, is I'm sure the apologists would make better arguments if they had any available to them. Unfortunately, they don't.
That was one of your best lines in the episode.
I know, and it wasn't quoting Shakespeare, pal. I know exactly who that was because I've heard it like every single time you said it. It's a great quote, right? I'm sure that you would make better arguments if you had them. Diebold asked this question, and I'm going to ask both of you. Has Austin talked to any critics? I'll tell you, I'm not aware of any. Are any of you, either of you, aware?
The closest he got was he had a conversation with Steve Pinecker.
That's not a critic.
Pinecker's not a critic, but he's not avowedly in the pro-Mormon podcasting space. So that's as close as it ever got, as far as I'm aware.
Right. And I'll say that his status as not being a critic helped out because he did ask him a few questions to help suss out some details of Austin's background experience, which didn't seem to make any sense when compared with the real world. And we did an episode about that as well.
Well, it's always funny to me when someone says they did a deep dive on atheism and they don't know who any of the four horsemen of the new atheist movement are. Whether you accept their arguments or don't, that's a completely different question. I'm just saying, and we'll get to it in just a second. Austin says he did extensive research and doesn't even know who like the four most, prevalent atheist speakers for that time period were. I think that kind of shows you how extensive that research actually was.
It was extensive, I tell you, extensive. And I mentioned something on last night's party, I should say, at Mormonism After Dark.
Yeah, thank you for not giving my phone number out live, by the way. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I put it in the live chat so that it wouldn't be available to anybody. Okay. But I mentioned this. If you go to Amazon where you can buy Austin's book, you'll find that the reading age is listed as 14 to 18 years.
Huh.
I just thought that was interesting enough to bring up. So,
how so?
Yes?
How so? Why is that interesting?
I don't know. Just because it's written by kids for kids. He's just a kid who wrote a book. It could be published by Mattel.
That is so funny.
Well, thank you. But it's up there, and I just thought it was funny. I thought I'd bring it to your attention. Randy, what do you think of that? Do you think anything of that?
I think it just is more of the same in terms of just a shallow, sloppy response. I like you kept saying throughout the series, Colby, I can't get in the guy's mind. I don't know his true intentions or those kinds of things, but I can tell you that in terms of taking these issues really seriously and really digging in, he uses, he uses some of the lingo with critical thinking and logical fallacies. His understanding of those concepts is, a mile wide and an inch deep. It's just really, really shallow. And it was painful to, listen to him. The other thing is that he set up straw man after straw man. Is he would constantly say things like, critics say this, and he would then say something like that. I'm a critic. I've never said that. I've never heard any critic ever say that. And yet, on the other hand, you guys are putting up actual quotes of his letter. So you quote him and allow him to, in essence, testify verbatim from his original primary source. That's a fair, debate. The fair debate on the critic side is fair and reasonable and rational, whereas his were just straw man after straw man, where you're scratching your head saying, nobody I know says that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, he's busy putting arguments in our mouths, and every time he does it, virtually every time, I'm sure, it's a straw man. And it's better not to quote the person you're quoting if you're creating a straw man. I did want to mention this. I'm sorry, Colby?
That's where it really just gets to the point of this letter is it's written to assuage people who already believe in what they already believe. That's the point of it. It's a team sport. This strain of apologetics, Austin Fife, Ward Radio, Jacob Hansen, that's all these guys are doing. So they can never actually let the critical arguments speak for themselves. There was also one time that Ward Radio was doing a response while we were doing an episode live, RFM, one of the first several.
Yes, I remember.
They tuned in for less than 30 seconds.
So they're doing their thing live while our thing is premiering, and they are streaming us into their live show on a Saturday night a year ago.
Right. And they got so much information from how little they listened to that they were talking about the vernal Holly map
the map.
argument. Yeah, which is a terrible argument, by the way. And even I think Jeremy Reynolds has acknowledged he wouldn't put that in like a revised version of the CES letter today if he were doing it again. And we were saying that. We were saying that this is a bad argument, but they understood what we were saying so little because they don't actually listen to Randy's point that they were saying, I can't believe they're defending this vernal Holly stuff. And it's like, well, that's because we weren't.
Like, no, we weren't. And actually, neither had Jeremy Reynolds.
Right.
He had initially, he'd done the whole Vernon Holly map, which had some that were on point and some that were not because they were too late in time.
Right.
And it was pointed out to him, and so he took it out. So the one that he has in the book now, which is online, right?
Right.
His book, the CES letter, is regardless of whether it's a great argument, I think he's on record. Jeremy's on record saying he doesn't think it's a great argument. Maybe he's going to take it completely out of the book, but it's still there. But at least he has the cities and place names that were created after the Book of Mormon came forth. He got rid of those because those have nothing to do with whether they would have influenced place names in the Book of Mormon. Obviously, it's a simple matter of chronology. And yet, after he did that, then what this book does is it goes back to an earlier version of his book before he had changed it and criticized him for what he changed. And this was years ago he had changed it. It wasn't like it just happened and, oh, this is a reasonable mistake. Right. I had to put this up here. Number one, because it's a super chat. Number two, because it's Diamond Dave. And number three, because it's very, very funny. Austin makes straw man arguments on what he thinks the people he never will talk to will say. Perfect.
Good one.
Perfect. Love that one. And we all love Diamond Dave over here on this side of the Pacific. All right, so let's go to this next one. Oh, I did realize what this probably does mean, this 14 to 18 years old. What it means is that this book should only be read by 14 to 18-year-old computers, because that's apparently what it was written by. It was written by computers for computers 14 to 18 years old, and they'll get every reference.
I'm just impressed it didn't say, a few months shy of your 14th birthday to 18. That would have been good.
That would have been, you're right. Are you still using this slide, monsieur?
No, I think people are mostly familiar with this. I was just going to remind people in Austin's first chapter, so the first episode that RFM and I did together, because you had skipped to that church finances for your first episode, which was a later chapter. Yes. We pointed out that Austin has this gigantic list of manipulation tactics and logical fallacies. He's got a series of them: poisoning the well, ad hominem, straw man, appeals to emotion, appeals to authority.
And they go on and on. This is just a representative sample.
Exactly. I just wanted to remind people what we're going to look at over the next couple slides is how many times did Austin use these manipulation tactics and logical fallacies that he decried in his first chapter. And again, the importance of this, I don't think, can be understated. This is an internal consistency. It's one thing to get stuff wrong when you're referring to external material. That's going to happen from time to time. People make mistakes. There are times that I've had to do like very slight, none to the extent of like what Austin 5 should have done, but very slight corrections of like, hey, I said this, I should have said this. Hey, I misstated this statistic. I reversed it while I was reading it off of a slide. Yeah. We've done those types of corrections. This type of error where you spend your entire first chapter laying out all of these arguments that are so manipulative, according to you. He literally, in that chapter, calls them an act of psychological rape. And then he goes out and uses them throughout the rest of his book. Almost, well, we'll get to how often he uses them here in just a second. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, sir.
So here is my breakdown using AI to scrub through the entire thing, through the entire Light and Truth letter. I mean, we have pointed these out while we've been doing the response series, but this is actually just based on looking at the letter itself and only looking at sentence level hits. So what I mean by that is AI is not able yet to fully process this amount of text and look at like an argument the same way RFM and I might be able to, because we understand Mormonism better, obviously, than a computer is going to. So this is where these tactics are used in a sentence, and AI is able to recognize it and categorize it as one of these fallacies. So what I'm really saying is this is understating the amount of hits of each of these different fallacies. So as far as poisoning the well, where Austin discredits critics automatically by talking about their motive or their character. Aside from the quote mines that he used at the beginning of each of his chapters, there were 27 sentence level hits where critics are framed as manipulative, abusive, propagandistic in a way that functions to pre-disqualify their arguments before any type of engagements. I've got some representative samples there. He used phrases like sheer hatred of the critical community, labeling critics as misguided, says that critics calculate the right things to influence the victim. Remember, in his first chapter, he repeatedly uses words like victim, target, psychological rape, which are just so unhinged to me. So there were 20 of those throughout the rest of the letter. And again, that's really understated. Randy, I know that you've got a real passion for critical thinking and your course that you do on this. Can you maybe explain why poisoning the well is such a problem and why it would be so odd for someone to decry that in one chapter and then use it 20 times throughout the rest of their book?
Well, yeah, before I do that, I got to just say that that my personal favorite throughout the whole series is when you pointed out his logical, he points out a logical fallacy, and then you find him committing that same logical fallacy on the same page. I was just laughing. Yeah, but poisoning the well is where you basically just do that. You go and set up your opponent in a way that makes them look ridiculous and from the get-go, so you don't even go there because it's already kind of dangerous. And frankly, let's remember that Awesome Five is a product of Mormon neurology, meaning the Q15 do this stuff all the time. Lazy learners and lax disciples and don't listen to opponents. That's poisoning the well, because we have Mormons love their labels. I did an episode somewhere where I literally went from A apostate to Z. I forget what it was. Zion's haters.
You did that with us. You did that with both of us.
Oh, I did. Okay, good. Yeah, and every letter of the alphabet, there was a Mormon label directed at us critics. I mean, Mormons love their labels, and that's poisoning the well.
You know what was the most hurtful label on that entire slide that you had, Randy?
Tell me.
Rando.
Oh, you grabbed that one, and being Randall, I applaud you for your brilliance, because that's one I would use myself if you hadn't already grabbed it.
The name Randall, as in Randall Bell, actually comes from the Greek for rando.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Bart Ehrman could have told you that, but he was too nice. Was there anything else? Yes, the ad hominem.
Yeah. Do you want to read that one, RFM?
Sure. 11. So your AI, which you have fine-tuned to think like you, it's brilliant. 11 sentence level hits were identified in the Light on Truth letter, where the critique is redirected from claims to critical psychological motives. Right. Examples: misery loves company and personal vendetta, ascribing those, of course, to the other side of the argument, the critics of his position.
Yeah, my personal favorite here was when he went on the big tear about Costco, like comparing Mormon stories to like a podcast that would talk bad about Costco. And I just thought, like, this is just such a weird thing to pivot to when you're talking about like legitimate issues in the church, to compare it to like criticizing Costco.
Yeah. I vaguely remember that, but it makes so little sense. It didn't really, I didn't create a file for it.
It didn't register.
It's just our next one, dangling Chad in the brain.
That's right. Our next one was the appeal to emotion. And again, severely understated here, but the AI found 29 sentence level hits that rely on moral panic framing rather than actual argument. So, I mean, I think this is really the crux of the entire letter. The whole idea, the whole story at the beginning. I told my wife that I lost my faith, and she told me that if I found more light and truth outside of the church, that she would follow me to it. All of that is an appeal to emotion. So it's like in the bedrock of what the Light and Truth letter is, that it has to appeal to emotion, which is, as Randy can speak to, like, appeals to emotion can be very valuable persuasive tools, but it's when we use an appeal to emotion in place of logic, in place of evidence, in place of like legitimately structured rhetoric, that it becomes a problem.
It did occur to me after hearing for the 100th time, and it's also in the description of the book at Amazon, about how his wife told me, if I find more light and truth outside of Mormonism, then she'll follow me. And she meant it. It occurred to me finally that what was unstated was which of them, Tikla or Austin, was the one who got to be the final arbiter on whether he had discovered more light and truth. That was not nailed down there, but I think I know what the answer would have been if it had come to that. What do you think, Randy?
I think that he is just showing his true cards by the fact he won't show. You repeatedly invited him on the show, and that blew my mind because if somebody, if the Midnight Mormons called me and said, "Hey, will you be on your show? We want to try and rip you apart," I would be happy to go and talk to them. And the fact that you kept inviting him and inviting him and inviting him, and he kept blowing you off, that's a big tell right there.
What does it tell you?
It tells me he's chicken shit. I mean, you asked me, that's my answer. Let's face it, the Mormon Church claims 17.5 million members. We're down to 3 or 4 million people that actually show up. That means that 12, 13 million Mormons have nothing to do with Mormonism. And the people that are distilled down to the 3 or 4 million that show up, I hate to say it because this is kind of an ad hominem, but in my opinion, there's a lot of desperation and insecurity. And deep down, they know something's wrong. They're afraid to look at it. They're afraid to engage at it. It is so in contrast with the world I live in now, because I now affiliate with people with a variety of beliefs, frankly, from A to Z. But they all are principled. They will all show up for a principled discussion and defend their worldview. They will not defend their worldview. That's what it tells me.
Yeah, it's just such a weird thing. I shared this with you, RFM. Earlier in the week, I went to a continuing legal education program. And just by happenstance, there were a few of the cases that were being presented at this continuing legal education program that I had actually been the attorney that had argued on several of these cases. And while we were discussing one of these cases, the attorney who was doing the training slightly misstated the holding of one of the cases. It was actually a little bit more than just slightly misstated the holding. He had it backwards. So I raised my hand and I just said, that was me being nice. I raised my hand and just said hey, I argued on behalf of this, this side of this, this litigation. Let me tell you, you had that a little bit backwards. My point in sharing that, and then I received, as I shared with RFM, I received a bunch of follow-up questions for people who are interested more in that topic. And the only reason I'm sharing that is not to brag, is to say, when you have put work into something and you really care about it, you are completely comfortable sitting there and fielding questions. I worked on these cases and argued these cases 2 years ago. And I'm still able to remember the nuances of the law that we were engaging on and where the pain points were for my case. Because it was one of those cases where I won most of the things, but I lost some of the things, and the other side won a few things. So that's why there was some nuance in talking about this holding. And I was excited to do that because it was something that I had worked on and I was excited to share. To your point, Randy, it's very weird that you would get an invite to talk to people who want to talk to you about your work and not want to talk about it. That is just a very weird thing to me.
Yeah. And on top of that, let me just add, on top of that, I guess the call is to try and bring us back. To this day, I've been out of the church for a long time now, many years, but I wish it were true. If somebody came back and answered all these questions, there's something in me, in my DNA, and the fact that, the Bell family goes all the way back to Nauvoo and all of that. I wish it were true, but it's just not. And here they're given a golden opportunity to get us all back. And it's not just Austin Fife. I'm going to call out the Q15. Where's their defense of all these arguments of the truth claims? It's crickets. It's just overwhelming silence, and it's deafening silence.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what, Colby?
Which really speaks for itself. They don't
they do.
have any good answers. That's the reality. The gospel
But he
topic
does-
essays were the best attempt they have at answers, and they're bad. They're real bad.
He may not have answers, but he does have a new book.
Oh, someone asked in the comments if we would be reading that. We absolutely will not be reading that.
No.
We have put in more than enough of, RFM and I are on a text thread known as the Exmo Avengers, and someone, you shared that he had written a new book, and I said, and we will not be reading it. It's someone else's turn to tag in.
At the party last night, somebody asked, are you going to be doing a series on the new book? And I said, F no. I said, F no. But, it's amazing that this dropped like a year and a half ago in August. It'll be 2 years. And he's already got a new book out. This guy is writing these books. We barely get done critiquing one, and he's got a new one out. And the reason that surprises me is because usually people take a dump more often than that. A little twist there.
Yeah, I would nuance that. Nuance that a little bit and say, you know what? I'll critique the second book, but you got to first show up and debate the first book.
Yes, absolutely. And the new book is about how to keep people from leaving the church after they read his first book. It's true, actually. That's what it's about. Trying to keep people from leaving the church. That's the goal. But we don't want to actually talk to the critics of the church, the non-believers. We want to keep the people in without talking to them. So I'm sorry, you got appeal to authority. What's this one?
I'll hit this one really quick. So we've got appeal to ignorance. We had 40 instances of one of Austin's favorite phrases. How did Joseph, whatever, across the rest of the letter, if not by divine means, how? His, questions that were often in that green text with the arrows on them. The argument from ignorance is inherently a shift of the burden of proof. It's the argument that because I don't understand something, or I want to argue basically like from perplexity, like because I don't understand something, that's the argument. That's why it's called argument from ignorance. And, that one was used at least 40 instances at the sentence level hit. Hasty generalizations about critics as a unified block. This one was interesting to me.
By the way, Colby, please don't go too fast, because I think those examples help me understand, like, how did Joseph know something, right? How is he aware of this thing? And those are arguments from ignorance, because what we're saying is we don't know how, and therefore it must be the thing that I'm talking about, which is the ancient thing that Joseph Smith would not have known about by natural means.
Right. Whether it's Nahum or the Book of Mormon generally. I think in our first episode we did together, RFM, and I think the analogy was useful framing for the rest of the episode. I use this analogy talking about trying to determine the authenticity of a silver certificate or any other type of document that you're going to look at. If you can't explain, so think of it this way. We're trying to authenticate a silver certificate, and it's got the right paper, it's got the right year, it's got the right ink, but based on the year, we look at it and it's got the wrong signature for the Secretary of the Treasury. You know automatically, based on that it is not an authentic silver certificate. And so while it might be interesting to engage in answering the questions of how did the fraudster get the right paper, how did they get the ink to look right? This should sound very familiar to people who are familiar with what Mark Hoffman did. This is how he was able to be so successful as a forger. The fact that you are not able to explain exactly how someone created something doesn't then mean that it's an authentic silver certificate. There are pieces of evidence that are automatically disqualifying. And so while I think it's interesting to engage in explanations about where the Book of Mormon may have come from, or pieces of parts of the Book of Mormon may have come from, it simply is not what it purports to be, a translated record of an ancient text that belonged to ancient American Hebrews. It just isn't that. And so how did Joseph Smith come up with whatever, thing that Austin wants to gawk at is just irrelevant ultimately to answering that question.
Well, when you put it that way, it does occur to me that my entire career in apologetics, and I think pretty much everybody who's doing this kind of apologetics in the Mormon church today, like Austin Fife, they're busy looking at everything else on the silver certificate except for the signature, which they know is there, but don't want to really think about too much.
Yep, you're exactly right. On the hasty generalization point, unless you have anything on arguments from ignorance, Randy.
No, we call it. I teach, as you guys know, I teach a class on critical thinking. We call it onus probandi.
Mhm.
Mean it's Latin, meaning if you made the argument, you got to defend it. Which is one very clever thing that Joseph Smith did in Moroni 10 with putting the burden of proof on us or on the non-believer. It's not our burden. It's not the investigator's burden. If you're making a claim and the claim is that this is evidence that the Mormon church is the one true church, that's your claim and you have the burden to prove it. And yet they try and transfer that burden to others and take themselves out of it, and it's intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, I completely agree. Speaking of intellectually dishonest, there are a number of times that Austin engages in hasty generalizations about critics as a unified block. And Randy, you spoke to this earlier. What it really looks like to me Austin did is he scoured Twitter and Reddit for the most unhinged or uninformed takes he could take from anyone who didn't believe in the church anymore. And then he stitches all of those together as a pastiche, and that's kind of the critic he's responding to. He's not responding to serious critics like the work of Dan Vogel or Bill Davis or some of the episodes that you both have done. He's responding to like the bottom of the barrel stuff that he could find on purpose. Like he did that on purpose. And so there were 29 sentence level hits where Austin generalizes about the critics as a category. The critics do X, critics want Y, without ever really narrowing it to any one person in particular, with basically one exception, which is John DeLynn or Jeremy Reynolds. I guess two exceptions. Those are the two people he talks about specifically. I found it interesting that even though his book, the first edition, I think was 205 like substantive pages, in that 205 substantive pages, the word critics appears 350 times in the body of the letter, which just tells you what is the purpose of this letter as a piece of rhetoric. It is a boogeyman. It is trying to make you scared of critics, scared of the others, scared of people like John, scared of people like Jeremy Reynolds, scared of people like us. That's the point of the letter. It is a giant boogeyman trying to scare people away automatically from anything they might hear that's critical of the church.
Well, if that's the case, I think it definitely worked on Austin. His own book scared him out of talking to us. What do you think, Randy?
You know, I got the CS letter right here, the book here, and I met Jeremy Reynolds for the first time. I'd always wanted to meet him, and I met him at Thrive a couple weeks ago. And I got to just say, we had a long talks day after day because my little booth thing was next to his, and which was by design because I kind of asked for that because I was so anxious to meet him. He is the nicest, kindest person and cool and interesting and anything but threatening. And that's a common theme. Critics of the church tend to be very rational. You know, sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, you know, whatever. That's not the point. Is we're able to lay out our positions, and yet the apologists, the Mormon apologists, they just keep at distance. They label, they throw names out, they do hand wave dismissals, all red flags for having a really bad argument.
It's remarkable to me that Jacob Hansen has any following at all under the circumstances where he refuses to debate me or Colby about whether the Book of Mormon is true. And by that, I mean historical, something that can actually be debated. He refuses to.
It's just such a weird thing to have one of the leading Mormon apologists admit in like live video, 4K, that he lacks the expertise to defend his faith's foundational book of scripture, and that people still listen to him. It's just, it kind of is its own data point on how broken the epistemology in that community is the way I would put it.
Yeah. And I got to add to that, Colby. Plus, you made a point earlier that I thought was brilliant, and that is he's dedicated his life to something he can't defend.
Yeah, great point.
Exactly. That's a good
It's your
point.
point.
What I think is
Well,
that he
that's why I
does
said
know the
it.
Book of Mormon well enough to know he'll get his ass kicked if he tries to debate about its historicity. That's what he means when he says, I don't know enough about it. Because you can never know enough about the Book of Mormon to win an argument about its historicity with somebody who knows it as well. Appeal to authority at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah, so the appeal to authority fallacy is when you're making the argument that something is correct inherently because some authority figure said this, right? There were 45 sentence level hits where general authority or general conference authorities, institutional scholars, other types of apologists are leaned on for their expertise rather than actually treating them as sources to be evaluated. The thing that's really interesting here about Austin's use of appeal to authority is there were numerous times we caught Austin I'll say either misunderstanding or misrepresenting the very scholars that he was citing. So we did that specifically with his Nahum argument, if you remember RFM, and it was so thorough at debunking that he literally changed the letter in response to that episode, as well as some other criticisms, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Any comments from you about that, Randall Bell?
No, I'm good. Press forward.
It is amazing. Once again, these are all critical thinking errors that Austin identifies in his first chapter and then accuses non-believers of using them, and then he proceeds to use them in spades throughout his entire book. Ironic is too small a word.
I think we might have one last example. So I pulled together this little illustration because thinking of quote mining made me think of one of the opening scenes of Jurassic Park, where the guy's digging for the fossils there, and says, Grant's like me, he's a digger. And I thought Austin sitting there saying he's like me, a quote miner, because Austin engaged in 21, and this is again ignoring the quotes at the beginning of each chapter. So you would have to basically double this amount. This is the in the text, not in the introductions to each chapter. 21 sentence level hits that match this snippet style quote mining. Quote mining is when you go look for, people do this all the time with like Charles Darwin's work or any number of different scholars' work. Well, they'll go find some line that they said that sounds weird, and it sounds like it's the exact opposite of what that person would say. That's because it usually is. If you go look at the quote in its context, it isn't saying what the person says that it says. My overall summary here on these is just in the ones we've looked at over the last couple slides. And again, these are severely understated because I was only instructing it to look for sentence level hits. We had close to 100 direct sentence level hits of these fallacies that Austin himself, I cannot stress that enough, calls manipulation tactics that should not be listened to. His book is just over 200 pages. That's one every other page that he's committing the same logical fallacies that he calls acts of psychological rape in the first chapter.
Well, to be fair, he was quote mining when he said that.
He did. That's true.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So Austin, he is a quote miner sung to the tune of I'm a Girl Watcher. He's a quote miner. Okay. Every day. You know that song, Randy Bell?
I've heard it, but it's been a while.
It has been a while for me too, but this jogged it loose for some reason.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you didn't ask me, RFM, because I've just gotten accustomed to laughing at references I don't get.
Good. I have you trained well, young Padawan. All right. So I'm going to go to the next slide.
Great.
Hearing no objection.
Oh, here was my overall fallacy use heat map. And this was my Austin's fallacy hour Sesame Street illustration. I had to share it one more time. Again, AI picked up on the same exact thing that I did. There's structural irony in a letter that you start with the first chapter that decries the use of these tactics, and then you use them all throughout the rest of your letter. So this heat map is just showing which ones were used the most frequently. So straw man, question begging, false dichotomies, appeal to authority, poisoning the well, and special pleading, on top of the ones we just looked at over the last couple slides. You are muted, sir.
I meant to do that. And Austin did too, because I wonder if you remember, I know you remember that this is why This was the very reason why you had trouble believing that this was a serious effort on Austin's part, and that he wasn't just having us on by listing all of these fallacies, these logical fallacies, and then so flagrantly committing them willy-nilly throughout his book. Do you still believe that?
At this point, I believe that Austin is just engaged in some really severe trying to assuage his cognitive dissonance. So I think it's just really strong motivated reasoning.
I think he meant to do this, and this was just a trap that you fell into. Yeah, we'll get to that, won't we?
He's want to do that. So
did you already get to your interesting observation?
I did. Yep, I shared that. The substance of it.
Very good. Thank you. And then there's some more.
Yeah, this actually goes to the question you just asked me. So while I was breaking this down and kind of having this interesting back and forth questions with the AI that had access to all of these sources, meaning both versions of the Light and Truth letter, and then our entire 2,500 page transcript. I asked, what are your thoughts on the intellectual capabilities of someone who so regularly engages in tactics that Austin described the way he did in the first chapter? And this is exactly the answer to the question you just asked me, RFM.
So this is from your computer.
Yeah. Does repeated use of those tactics imply low intelligence? The computer starts by breaking out. You're asking about intellectual capability, but what you've demonstrated so far is a pattern of rhetorical inconsistency. These are not the same thing. And then it makes the point that I think you have made before a number of times about apologetics, which is it actually is. I'm going to use one apologist in particular as an example of this. Don Bradley is incredibly intelligent. He is so intelligent that he sees connections where I think absolutely none exist. And the point that the computer is making here is that it is not low intelligence to use these tactics. These tactics involve understanding structure of arguments, understanding rhetoric, understanding how effective it is to engage in these tactics. So it's either intentional or it's someone who's engaged in such clear, motivated reasoning that they don't even see it. Regardless, the point is that the rhetorical inconsistency, the internal inconsistency, is a huge problem if you care about critical thinking and thinking logically.
Very, very good. Any comments from you about that, Randy? Because I think the computer's wrong. I think Austin is just a dumbass.
Well, you may be right, but he strikes me as a guy who suffers from the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is basically you learn a little bit about a topic and then you kind of overstate your case based upon a knowledge base that's really not there. When I teach the classes on critical thinking, I stress, look, you don't go to critical thinking jail for getting the wrong label, because there are literally hundreds of categories of cognitive bias. There are literally hundreds of logical fallacies. It's hard to keep them all straight. And sometimes there's a gray area, which one's the wrong one. But it's quite clear, in spite of that latitude when we use them, that he may be very, very bright, but in terms of his purported ability to engage critical thinking and get involved in the lingo, as I said earlier, it's very shallow, and he doesn't have a command of that. On one hand, I do want to say something nice about Austin Fife, because that's just the guy I am. I think it's cool that he will stand up and defend his worldview. I respect people that are willing to do that.
At least at a distance.
What? Sorry?
At least at a distance.
Well, that's where I switched to not being so charitable, because if you're going to defend your worldview, defend it. Engage. Come on your show and defend it. I think he quickly realized. I think he was very proud of himself, and he got obviously a ton of validation and accolades from the Mormon, act, the TBMs. But when I think your series came out, I think I'm just guessing, he quickly realized, hey, he got caught with his pants down around his ankles, and he didn't have a defense. So while I do admire his initial ability, he does what all Mormons do, what he's taught by the Q15 to do, and he doesn't apologize. All you got to say is, you know what? I got to go back to the drafting board. I'll be back and have better arguments, which I could respect. But he didn't even do that.
Good the point. Conclusion is already set in stone. It's just maybe changing the road a little bit as to how you get there.
A little bit, yeah.
Right. In fact, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to his two different versions of his letter. I think that's a great point, Randy. I just wanted to share one thought here while we're talking about kind of the overall strategy of apologetics. RFM, you did this episode recently about God of the gaps type arguments, and which are inherently an argument from incredulity, right? We don't understand how something was done, therefore it must have been whatever you want to put in there. Aliens,
built the pyramids.
Exactly. That was the example you used. And I had this thought the other night when Cammie and I were talking about apologetics. Apologetics, the point you made in that episode, RFM, that resonated with me, I called you the day after to tell you I thought it was such a good episode because you stated that apologetics is about inherently trying to make someone believe the less likely conclusion. That is what it is as an endeavor. And I thought about that. And as I was talking to Cammie about it, I shared this example in this analogy, which is apologetics often hinges on pointing out like one lone piece of a puzzle that we're missing to argue that what is almost certainly a street lamp, in this example that I've got here illustrated, could be anything other than a street lamp. They can argue that that could be a bus, that it could be a house, that it could be an Amazon warehouse, even though you've got everything but that one little piece missing. That's the type of work that they're engaged in. And that is effort that takes work. In that sense, Austin's argument, or Austin's work, Austin's book is no different because the prime engine of its arguments, as you saw, the most frequent fallacy that it uses is the argument from personal incredulity. And so if all you're using is over and over and over again, how did Joseph know whatever mundane fact you want to talk about? That just, I think, speaks a lot to the caliber of a type of work of this nature, that it's powered by personal incredulity. And I think it goes very strongly with your point, Randy, about Dunning-Kruger. Like, it's really easy to be perplexed by everything if you don't understand very much about the way the world works. They're like basic things that RFM and I were pointing out in the Light and Truth letter that can be explained pretty simply if you've had I don't want to be unkind. I just say will be explained pretty simply if you just look into them for, honestly, a few minutes.
I will tell you that what you've said there about using continuously this argument from ignorance, in other words, I don't know how Joseph Smith could have done X, therefore it was from God. And he uses that over and over. It's a common apologetic trope. It reminds me of this new quote I learned from Schopenhauer, Arthur Schopenhauer, who said, every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. We think that if we can't conceive of something, no one can. If we can't do something, nobody can. Although usually we understand that that doesn't make sense in athletic competitions, at least when you get to my age. So there's that. And then the fact that you use a street lamp, I thought was fortuitous, because it reminds me of this funny joke, which describes the same thing in, I think, a humorous way. It's the one I've told before where the guy's walking down the street. It's nighttime, and there's a street lamp. And he sees a guy who's down on his hands and knees searching frantically under the street lamp. And the first guy says to the second guy, hey, what's going on? Second guy says, I lost a quarter. I'm trying to find it. First guy says, really? Where'd you lose it? Second guy says, well, I lost it down the block. And the first guy says, well, how come you're not looking down there? And the second guy says, well, because the light's much better here. And I think that's what apologists do all the time. They're busy looking at the place that doesn't have anything to do with the issue because the light's better. And by that, I mean more favorable to their position.
Right.
Any comments from you, Dr. Bell?
Yes. This reminds me of, throughout the series, or certainly at particular points in the episodes, Austin Five makes the argument that Joseph Smith couldn't have written the Book of Mormon because he was too uneducated, and all that stuff we hear all the time, which seems to be a louder and louder theme we hear from not just Austin Five, but other apologists. And, a couple responses to that, it's no secret that I'm a geek and RFM are a geek. We love magic shows. We just were at a magic show a couple weeks ago in Vegas. And if RFM wants you to have the seven, he's going to show you a deck of cards and he wants you to have the seven of diamonds, you're going to end up with the seven of diamonds. I'm just going to tell you that as somebody that knows a little bit about magic. It's going to happen. And yet there are 5, 6, 7 different ways to force a card on a spectator. And so spectators, again, don't have the burden of proof. The church has the burden of proof to show the evidence for the Book of Mormon, but they're critical of the critics because there are numerous plausible ways Joseph Smith could have produced the Book of Mormon in a way that doesn't even resemble that where he just produced it, period. And there's no angel Moroni or anything else. And it's not our burden of proof of picking the right one because we didn't have video cameras in the room with his head in a hat with a peepstone to know which one of the 7 ways he forced a card, which technique he used. But we know he forced a card, and that's made clear by a lot of the other things. So that kind of, I think, needs reiterating because they were such brilliant points that you made during your presentations.
I do have to say, it occurs to me, Colby, that as you mentioned that we have the unusual spectacle of Austin Fife arguing that Joseph Smith was too dumb to write a book in a book that Austin Fife wrote. I think that's pretty funny.
It is funny.
All right, well, let's put this back up on the stage. And by the just point of order, I did make the argument that the apologetics is about convincing people to believe the less likely conclusion. And I made a distinction. It's not the least likely conclusion. Right. Sometimes it is, but it's always the less likely conclusion than the most obvious, rational, and reasonable conclusion. So just putting that out there. And here we go to another slide.
Yeah, this just reiterated kind of the different possibilities that we can see going on. This, I feel like I've already covered this in answering your question, RFM. I land basically in the third camp is I believe Austin's work is best explained by a blind spot created by his belief commitment. Even the way he's framed the letter from the very beginning, my wife would have followed me if I can find more light and truth outside.
Tikla definitely would have followed him.
Yeah, I've recurringly cited that to just say, like, the entire exercise was question begging because how he defines light and truth, even set aside the Tikla's involvement for a second, because I hadn't thought about that, but it is very funny to think about it that way. But let's just say it was Austin all by himself. The way he's going to define those terms and find value in those words is the way the Mormons have defined them. And so it inherently was an exercise in saying, can I find a more Mormonism outside of Mormonism? And shocker, no, he couldn't find a more Mormon version of Mormonism outside of Mormonism.
No. Tikla would have followed him directly to divorce court. That's where she would have followed him. Okay.
So I covered this.
So what do you think, Randy? Do you agree with that, or do you think there's a different explanation that better fits the facts for Austin's motivations?
I think Colby's right. I think that's a rational explanation. It's motivated reasoning. And frankly, I'm hesitant. The one nice thing about coming out of the Mormon church is you're just allowed to tell the truth, whether it makes you look good or bad. It doesn't really matter. I'm guilty. What I'm getting at is I was very guilty as an active TBM of doing the exact same thing myself. I have behind me a notebook this thick, where one day I just realized I didn't set out to do it, but I'd been to the Aztec, Mayan, and Inca civilizations. I had taken hundreds of pictures, and I put together a fireside of a presentation. And we're going back to the days where you put the transparency over the Elmer projector. It's way before the internet, I think. and that's why it's in a big binder behind us. I look back at that thing and I just cringe. I was Austin Fife on crack cocaine, myself, and I'll admit that. And I look back and part of me laughs and part of me just goes, what a dumbass. I mean, I really, that's not something I'm particularly proud of. So the point is, I got to have a little bit of compassion for Austin Fife because I played the dumb, apologist myself. And I shouldn't have said dumb because I'm not trying to be ad hominem and be mean. I'll take that back. But I'm just saying, I've done it myself. And I think for those of us who are in it to win it, need to give the guy a little bit of compassion. That's my thing.
I think you're right, because really Carden Ellis is the one who looks most like Austin Fife on cocaine.
It's pesticide, actually.
And it's crack cocaine.
It's not just codified, it's pesticide. All right, so let's look at this next slide.
Yeah, so for people who aren't familiar with this, I don't even know we've talked about this in the course of the series RFM. Austin did an update, like a version 2.0 of the Light and Truth letter in January 2025. We'll get to
a little over a year ago.
Yeah, we'll get to why that timeline is interesting and who may be responsible for many of these changes here in just a second. Austin added this update to the beginning of the letter, like in the introduction, where he says, after some feedback, I feel it is necessary to define the critics to whom this letter addresses. When I say the critics, I refer to individuals and organizations that manipulate data and history to harm the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with the intention of persuading current members to resign their membership, former members to stay away, or potential future members to avoid membership.
Okay, well, that's not me, because we don't manipulate the data, and it's not you, so maybe that's why he doesn't talk to us, because we don't fall under his definition of critics.
Yeah, I don't really know anyone he would be talking about here. It's also funny, the double standard, because the church has absolutely, they have done more as far as transparency goes with the Joseph Smith papers and with the Gospel Topics essays, but the church has absolutely manipulated data and history to benefit the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with the intention of persuading current members to continue on in their membership, former members to rejoin, or potential future members to join. And he has no problem with that. So his problem isn't with the principle of manipulating the data. It's with the conclusion people reach. And it just is so clear in the way he's framed this. He then continues.
He has a career ahead of him in church leadership.
Yeah. I don't think the church is going to appoint any of these self-styled experts to leadership personally. Says, when writing this letter, I preferred to use the term the critics as opposed to a more pejorative term like anti-Mormon. A disillusioned former or current Latter-day Saint with sincerely held doubts and concerns does not fit this definition of the critics. Thank you to those who identified the need to clarify this distinction. You, sir, are welcome.
So is this a distinction with the difference? What difference does it make that he added this paragraph to try and clarify? I think he muddied it more than he clarified it.
Yeah, he added this paragraph because he was embarrassed by us. That's 100% what happened.
He added this in order to explain why he's not going to talk to us?
He added this after we were criticizing him, and I have a clip here on the next slide. The changes, let me just briefly explain the changes in the letter. So aside from providing this update in the introduction, he made minor adjustments to some of the arguments. He softened the tone in the introduction that emphasizes how deep his research was. So it went from, I have learned a lot in my honest and exhaustive 10-year search, to I have learned a lot in my honest and extensive 10-year search. Those are more or less synonyms, but it is slightly a softer synonym, I would say. Exhaustive means exhaustive. Extensive could mean less than exhaustive.
I really worked hard on it, but don't expect me to know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. His overall argument structure remains essentially the exact same. It's powered by personal incredulity. That's the engine that's driving this bus. I think now I've got the clip from one of our first episodes, RFM, where we talk about the biggest problem with this letter is the way it's framed as being written to the critics. And I think that explains why this update was needed, because there were even like believing members that were pushing back on Austin based on our criticism that I had seen.
Right. So let me see if I can find this. I think I can. I think it's right there. This is the one, right?
Yeah, when our thumbnail game was not as strong, I will say.
Yeah, well, those were the good old days. That was
Below,
when I developed serious concerns about how the church made its case.
yeah, I was going to say,
And I found out that I was tricked into accepting false premises and half-truths.
yeah, exactly right. That's the thing that's so funny about this team sport nonsense at the beginning of this letter is
Mhm.
this letter is not written. I know it starts in the introduction saying to critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it's not written to critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's not written to people who've left the church. It's written to people who are in the church and want to feel better about what they already believe. And the way I would posit that is I haven't heard from a single person that read this letter as like a fully deconstructed ex-Mormon that said, "Oh, that answered all my questions." I mean, you already highlighted in the first episode how it doesn't talk about one of the most significant current events that confronted the church in the last year. And
And
so,
then when it comes to the 3 issues or 3 or 4 issues that it purports to address, it doesn't address them.
right.
Your comments on that, Colby?
We were so young, so full of hope, so full of vim and vigor.
And by the way, this bears repeating because I'm still astonished by it, but that's only because I'm so old and jaded, is that Colby actually confessed to me, and he confessed to you too, if you remember. He actually wondered when we began this project whether this book might answer some of his questions and might cause him to reconsider his move to leave the church. Isn't that true, Colby?
I did. Yeah. I felt the same feeling I had when I opened the CES letter as a believing member shortly after it was written, because my best friend had left the church and asked me if I would read it and talk to him about it. I had the way I could best describe it is like this anticipation of starting on a journey that you don't know where it ends. That's how I felt. Is people are saying that this answers all of the questions, that it's really good for people exactly like me. And I felt that. And then I got midway through the first chapter and realized these are not the droids I was looking for. And that's where we talked about, Poe's law, this idea that parody can be indistinguishable from that quality of work. That's how I feel about the entirety of the letter. But yeah, you can see right there this criticism that we both had of Austin says his letter's written to the critics. It isn't really written to the critics because it's not engaging with the strongest critical position. And so I think as a direct result of our repeated pushback on that point, Austin had that update in his version 2.0 because that was back in like November, maybe December of 2024.
Yes. Let me see here. I think this was, by the way, Randy, did you know that about Colby? That he had thought that maybe his testimony would be restored in some sense through reading the book?
I actually didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. I like I said earlier, I wish it were true. If they showed up and had game and really engaged and had intelligent answers, I'll go with where the evidence goes, but they just don't show up with evidence. In fact, they do just the opposite. It's one word. I can sum it all up in one word: dodge. They dodge everything. They're playing dodgeball, and then it's also a little combination of whack-a-mole. You hit them, then you nail them. Colby, comes in and just smashes them with a brilliant argument. And then RFM, you hit the next mole, and they just keep popping up, and you sit there the whole time whacking a mole.
Yeah.
It's
It
more
used to be against the law of chastity.
Yeah,
But it strikes me that we've got all these wonderful names. We've got the Psych Word Radio. We've got Jacob Hansen and Jonah Barnes and Psych Word Radio and Austin Fife. They could all get their new name tonight, which is the Dodge Brothers. These are the jokes.
Oh, one thing that was very interesting to me about Austin's changes is if you think about this as like a meta level, the edits that he made between the first version and the second version by just slightly softening the tone is very similar to the Mott and Bailey fallacy that we have called out repeatedly, RFM, right? The steps are publish a version of your arguments. Number 2, receive criticism. Number 3, clarify and fine tune the language. Number 4 is preserve the core argument, right? All he's doing is like adjusting things around the edges. He's not actually solving the big problems with his arguments. You then re-release the updated version, and then the argument engine remains intact, but its framing becomes slightly more defensible. That is a meta Mott and Bailey fallacy that he's done in releasing a second version without really owning up to the serious mistakes in the first.
That's a good point. It was never clear to me when his main argument is, I'm taking on the CES letter, and I'm going to debunk everything in the CES letter with my mighty arguments. But when he's called on it, he retreats to the Mott and says, I'm just a guy who wrote a book.
A letter, technically. But
I'm just a guy who wrote a letter. That's right. This is what he said to Colby. I'm just a guy who wrote a letter. So you can't be more carefully hidden up there at the top of that Mott. Because how do you attack? Well, that's completely, you can't get to me. I'm just a guy who wrote a letter.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the difference between the Mott and the Bailey, where he's actually saying, I'm destroying the CES letter.
Exactly.
Any thoughts from you, Randy?
My thoughts go back to the bringing up the SEC letter. I think we need to put a little more meat on the bone, because that was such an enormous, glaring omission. The SEC thing was just, the church was busted. What they did was illegal. It was not only illegal, it was at the very top levels. It was recent. It involved billions and billions of dollars. There's no way to put lipstick on that pig other than to say, we consider this matter closed, which goes back to my big word, dodge. And the way you guys frame that argument in your series and just did not let him get out of that box for omitting that. How on earth could you omit that? And then you did a brilliant job, in my opinion, at pointing out he knew about it, and you brought the evidence to the table that you knew about it. I mean, that whole discussion right there just torpedoes the credibility of both Austin Fife and the LDS Church and the Q15 and the highest levels going back for decades since this fraud began. And the SEC is this one thing, but you could say the same thing about the BSA child abuse. There were sections in your episodes talking about, sex abuse cover-ups, and the $250 million. I mean, we're all in court. We know what anything over 10 million raises eyebrows in verdicts and settlements that goes around, the newspaper that goes around to the legal community. That's another dodge, which he doesn't really address. And then the Prop 8, in terms of the power struggles with Prop 8, and that's a fraud where the church manipulated the California elections. And that's just current stuff. This is a theme that goes back to the very beginnings of Mormonism, with under the labels of sex, power, and money, the Nauvoo expositor. I mean, since when do you go in and burn down a printing press? That's a power play, pretty much unprecedented in U.S. history, going back to Joseph Smith. Sex, I mean, give me a break. Secret wives that you don't even tell your wife about, and they're down to 14 years old. That's just so revolting. And then the money and Kirtland Bank scandal, both historically and currently, Austin Fife dodged every one of those landmines and dealt with little piddly stuff. I love your Mott and Bailey thing, because he dealt with the little things he thought he could, which are benign, frankly benign, and he didn't even do that well. It was just an explosive disaster for anybody who's got 2 brain cells north of a rock.
I love that, Randy.
Wow, I've got to add to that. And that's saying something. Well said.
Thank you.
Here are just some more interesting facts about Austin's work. How many times does Austin use terms that label all criticism in framing of distrust? Words like deceive, dishonest, agenda, manipulate, trick, slander, lie. 310 times in 200 pages. How many times does he talk about?
Wait, that's more than once every page?
More than once every page. Almost
like
twice
more than the Book of Mormon mentions Jesus.
That's right. Discuss the myth of infallibility, try and bifurcate infallibility and doctrinal inerrancy. He does that 50 times. Present a false compromise 76 times. How many times he references mockery or name calling? And in this sense, I mean directed towards the church. So basically stoking that persecution complex 55 times. So in a nutshell, the central reasoning problem in the Light and Truth letter is that it is an argument from ignorance. It repeatedly treats unanswered questions about Joseph Smith's abilities as evidence for divine authorship, when a lack of explanation is not evidence for any particular explanation.
Well, what else would you expect from Austin 5 but an argument from ignorance? Just saying.
It's his bread and butter. It's his bread and butter. This is some interesting facts about the response series. So over the course of the response series, the illustration I've got here is I've got William Shakespeare on the left, RFM, well, some AI amalgamation of different versions of RFM that have been fed in over time. It doesn't actually look like you anymore.
Same with Shakespeare, by the way.
Yeah, true. Christopher Hitchens and then myself. And I'll get to why we have those two figures here. So for people who bet on which one was quoted more, RFM spoke for between 52 to 55% of the average episode. In part, that's because there were, I think, 2 episodes that I was not part of, the first one and then the one that you did with the women on women's issues in the church.
Otherwise, it would have been substantially more if you had just calculated the episodes that you and I were on.
Probably. I speak faster than you.
75%.
I speak faster than you, so that would have been why. I'm going to tell myself. Over the course of the series, that resulted in RFM speaking for roughly 360,000 words. I spoke for the remainder the majority of the remainder at approximately 315,000 words. For reference, the Book of Mormon is approximately 270,000 words. We had a few other guests join us. Jacob Prescott joined us to talk about LGBT issues in the church, and Elsie Walker joined us to talk about abuse issues in the church. You had the women's panel talk about women's issues in the church. Altogether, those episodes were about 12,000 words. So the total word count of this entire response series is 686,000 words, which is 2.5 times the length of the Book of Mormon. In fact, as you can tell, each of us, RFM and I both, spoke over the length of the Book of Mormon during this series. RFM was almost 100,000 words over it.
This is like the sealed portion.
It's like the sealed portion over just 20 recording sessions. And then my fun little facts I pulled here: in 20 sessions, I quoted or referenced arguments made by Christopher Hitchens 19 times, while RFM quoted or mentioned Shakespeare 26 times. Now, RFM asked me to try and pull this data, so I didn't do it just to be a jerk. He asked me, how many times did I interrupt you during the course of the series? And the AI was not able to calculate that, largely because there's no real signal. It's not listening to the videos. It's working from transcripts.
I thought it was because it couldn't count that high.
And let me just say, since I understand I'm making the comparison to the Book of Mormon here, I'm not saying this is the same work as the Book of Mormon. It's not a narrative. But it just goes to show when folks like Brian Hales do the stupid argument of, but where did the words come from? The amount of words is not necessarily that impressive. Like, we've engaged with a serious breadth of topics over the course of this series, and we both spoke for longer than the Book of Mormon is. So given enough time, given enough flannel, given enough claymation, you can do it too.
Well, that's good to know. Any thoughts from you about these amazing statistics, Randy?
No, I think my last diatribe, I used my capital.
That was really good too. My ears are still ringing, and so are Tikla's. How accurate were our criticisms compared to the original, to the letter itself? Is that what that's about, Colby?
Correct. Yep. This is our response compared to Austin's response. I tried to use a symmetrical framework. I have this kind of standard 6-point analysis that I'm doing when I'm responding to things to make sure that I'm getting it accurate. And then I do it when people respond to me. I may or may not have invented this after I had some exchanges with Jacob Hansen. So the 6 points of basically how fair are criticisms that I've used, and I've now used this for years, is number 1, the accuracy of representation of the opposing arguments. So how much are you straw manning versus how much are you allowing your interlocutor to speak for themselves? Number 2 is use of evidence in sources. I'll speak more to that in just a second. Number 3 is how responsive it is to the actual criticism. Are you actually dealing with what the person has said, like the full extent of their argument? Number 4 is logical consistency or use of fallacies. 5 is the scope and completeness of engagement, and 6 is the rhetorical fairness. Now, a few caveats I wanted to add here is, and I've talked to RFM about this before, this bot that I have worked with now for years has some long-term directives in it to be very fair, to not do what most AI models do and tell me what I want to hear. So I've like built in some longer term sideboards and protections. So that's one of the reasons that it didn't, as you notice, it didn't give us a 10 out of 10. It gave us a 7.7 out of 10 for the
that
total.
tells me that your AI needs some tinkering.
The one last thing that I wanted to say as far as like use of evidence goes is the AI is not in this prompt that I used. It is not doing external fact checking. That just would have been too much. And some of these things are too subjective. So it's just looking at, did you have evidence in the places that you should have evidence? Did you have sources in the place that you should have sources? It's not actually checking like we did. Are you actually accurately quoting those sources? It's looking for the sourcing itself, if that makes sense. So yeah, overall, you can see that Austin's, how well he represented opposing arguments was rated as a 5 out of 10. His use of evidence was a 6 out of 10. How responsive he was to the actual criticisms was 4 out of 10. Logical consistency, 5 out of 10. Scope of his engagement, 6 out of 10. And rhetorical fairness, 5 out of 10 for a total of 5.2 out of 10.
It makes me wonder what a 1 would look like.
It's drawn in crayon. And our overall score was a 7.7 out of 10. The things I thought were impressive was the scope of engagement, because we did basically, this was a thing that we talked about at the beginning. We wanted to go through it line by line, chapter by chapter, which we did. So we got a 9 out of 10 there. Responsiveness to the criticism, like how fair we were and accurately stating Austin's arguments, both in how he represented them and then responded to them, both 8 out of 10s. And then the other 3 were 7 out of 10s.
What do you think about that, Randy?
I've got a question. I think it's very telling, but I do have a question. Sure. From my memory, this is the question, but I couldn't remember Austin 5 actually quoting like a transcript from a Mormon Stories episode or one of your episodes or Rebecca, Landon, anybody. I don't remember any direct quotes from critics. And yet you did over and over and over and over again. You quoted right from his letter. I just want to ask, did he ever quote a critic verbatim?
Aside from like a few quotes from Jeremy Reynolds and John DeLynn, he exclusively, to my memory, quoted Twitter. I think that goes hand in hand with a statement in response to a question Steve Pinecker asked him about how he did his research. He literally said, I am not making this up. I wish I had the timestamp so we could pull this up. He said that his knowledge of atheism was social media meme-based research. I remember that because I commented on it.
See, that's kind of goes to my point. These statistics obviously are very telling, and they obviously lean in the brilliance of your episode. But you combine that with the fact that he's basically arguing with a straw man against Twitter. And I think also, if I remember right, also Reddit quotes. Right. Is that fair? Yeah.
Reddit and Twitter. That's right.
So he's arguing with some Reddit and some Twitter paraphrases. You're arguing with what he actually said. I think if that were somehow factored into these numbers, they'd be the spread would be even wider.
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think we'd be even higher.
I agree. If you'll go to the next slide, RFM, I did have it pull also a one sentence summary on why it scored the way that it did. And I also had it call us out for our most persistently used logical fallacies and how often we use them. So we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Our summary, Austin's summary, his book covers many topics and cites apologetic sources, but frequently engages simplified versions of critics' arguments, categorizes criticism as rhetorical manipulation rather than addressing the strongest forms of the argument, and sometimes relies on circular assumptions about supernatural explanation. I really wanted to read our summary because I think it tells you why we got 7 out of 10s in some of those categories. Directly quotes the letter and analyzes step by step across 686,000 words of discussion. This series is highly responsive to the original argument, though occasionally rhetorical tone, sarcasm, motive attribution, or claims about scholarly consensus pushes conclusions slightly beyond strict analytic neutrality. Now, here's the one beef I have with the AI that ran this is there is fallacious ad hominem where you are using ad hominem to sidestep the actual argument. You're going to discredit the source and not engage with the actual argument. And yes, RFM and I made jokes. We used sarcasm. We attributed motives to Austin Fife, but we also responded to literally every single argument he made. So this is where I would say you can have ad hominem that is accompanying some very legitimate arguments. And
let me try and express it this way, because you're starting to sound perilously close to Cardinellis now. The guy who at the debate, remember where he's saying, no, ad hominem is a bad thing except when I do it. That was his argument. Here's what I hear you saying. It's a little bit different, okay? We call, I'll just speak for myself, okay? This appeal to ridicule, moderate use, more prevalent from RFM as it says there, okay? Appeal to ridicule, that is not necessarily a logical fallacy. That's actually, it's logical the way I do it. So you see, when I do it, it's okay. The thing with Austin is, all right, I don't call him a dumbass so you won't listen to his arguments. I dismantle his arguments and then identify him as a dumbass for having made them.
That is the point I was trying to make. Thank you very much. My most prevalent logical fallacy was attributing motives to Austin when I probably should not have. And I actually talked about that in the conclusion episode, how I wish I had done less of that. I would note, even though those were our two most used logical fallacies, they were both rated at moderate use, not high use or very high use like several of Austin's categories were. When it comes to overstatement of scholarly consensus, that was low. Genetic fallacy, which is the argument that like Austin is citing apologetic sources here, we were often calling out where he was sourcing from and not automatically discrediting those apologetic sources. But I can understand why the computer saw this as genetic fallacy. Genetic fallacy is when you're discrediting an argument based on where it comes from, where its origin comes from. So that's why it's called the genetic fallacy.
I see. I thought it was calling Austin a dumbass because his parents are dumbasses. That's not the genetic fallacy, though.
No.
You're a naughty boy.
I like this. It looks like there's a special card or two here.
Yeah, this one was an interesting one. What differences do we exhibit in our presentation styles? So RFM style was described as narrative and rhetorical critique. Tends to operate in a storytelling / rhetorical analysis mode, which all of us have grown to love over the years. Seriously, I mean that, RFM. It's just a delight to listen to you.
It sounds so much less fun when a computer describes it, though.
The typical features of your argument, and I added this, I think this is likely based on your time as an apologist. You just are able to see where these arguments are headed based on your time there. You were typically explaining what Austin is trying to accomplish rhetorically. So like why he's arguing what he's arguing, why the arguments are framed in the ways that they are, your use of analogies and humor, and then you move very seamlessly between analysis and commentary. So it summarized your style as really a meta-analysis of rhetoric, which I think is a pretty high compliment, even if it does come from a computer. Mine was just described as appellate-level cross-examination. My style reads almost like a deposition or appellate brief delivered verbally. Typical features are moving from a quote to analysis to then testing the internal logic of it. Focusing on internal consistencies, burdens of proof, and epistemology. This brings extreme precision and focuses on logic by testing the claims systematically. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I think I've already given my thoughts. I'm going to pass the baton to Randy and ask you what you think about this.
I think from a consumer of the episode, I'm on the other side of the screen watching these episodes. I really enjoyed the different perspectives. I think you both brought game to the table. And I think, well, you know, I'm not trying to stroke you. I just think they were both brilliant, but different. What can we say?
I don't know. Thanks, what can Randy. You say? What can you say about that, Colby? I'll tell you, the last straw will be when the computer tells me I'm funny.
It did say you use humor, actually.
Oh, my gosh.
We're doomed. No, I just thought it was interesting that this is actually a question I didn't ask the computer. The computer told me, I noted something interesting about the differences in your presentation styles. Would you like to know it? And I was like, yeah, let's give me a summary. That's interesting to me. So it's interesting when you start feeding all of this stuff into one bot, and then you're asking it a series of questions, how interesting some of these discussions can get.
I hope it's as interesting to the audience as it is to me. And even more so. Our favorite fallacies. Go ahead.
Here's my favorite fallacy. So that Austin used, and by favorite, I mean that mostly sarcastically. Austin, in his first chapter, had the naturalist assumption listed as a fallacy. He used the same language and the same argument multiple times throughout the letter, where he basically says, if you assume that there are no supernatural or spiritual forces at play in the universe, that's engaging in a manipulation tactic or logical fallacy. The way I would just like sidestep this issue, and I think I did when we talked about it, is I consider myself a methodological naturalist, not a philosophical naturalist. So I don't assume there are no supernatural or spiritual forces at play in the universe. I just will believe in those things when they've been exhibited the same way we believe in anything else the way it's been exhibited. This is where we talked about Russell's teapot or Sagan's dragon. It goes back to Randy's comments about who bears the burden of proof. It's the person making a claim. If you're going to claim the angels do appear to men and give them gold plates, you should have a pretty good reason on why I should believe in angels and golden plates from that time period. Austin has neither. So,
well, there's the Book of Mormon. It exists. So all that stuff must have happened. Randy?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Colby, and I agree with you. I think it's a fine point. I would say it doesn't have anything much to do with naturalism or supernaturalism. It has to do with issues like, where's the DNA? Where's the archaeological evidence? I mean, let's engage the realities, supernatural or not. Let's just engage the claim that this is a historical document. And yet, is that backed up by the linguistics? There's a whole series. And the Book of Mormon, I'm sorry, I wish it were true, but it gets an F in every category. I mean, it's been proven so many different ways that Hebrews did not come over here. That was a prevalent myth at the time of Joseph Smith. And he certainly was not the first person to come up with that. That was a prevalent discussion when they were back around Dartmouth, and there were lots of people talking about it. I mean, one of the books I got here is View of the Hebrews, wherever it is. Ethan Smith's son was a contemporary of Hiram Smith. So where's the DNA? I mean, he never. It's always a dodge. There's never an engagement with the actual evidence, supernatural or natural. That's a secondary issue.
You know, I've got to say that this reminds me of a recent text exchange I had with Jared Halverson. And I was going to talk about it last night, but we were having too much fun. So here where it says critics who have naturalist assumptions are closed-minded by definition. This was the point that I think he was trying to get across to me, which is that because I don't typically go to supernatural solutions to problems, that therefore my epistemology is more limited than his. So really, if you want to look at this a different way, this is what Austin is saying here in bold. He puts on the right. Critics who have naturalist assumptions are closed-minded by definition. Let's examine that a little bit. He could just as well say critics who do not believe in leprechauns are closed-minded by definition.
Right.
Critics who don't believe in unicorns are closed-minded by definition. So that's really what he's getting across. He wants to leave open the field for the supernatural stuff to happen, because obviously it does have to happen for Joseph Smith to have been telling the truth and for the Book of Mormon to be true and the Mormon church to be real and God's only true church. All that stuff has to exist for those things to happen. And yet what they want to do is say, not only that, but that we are the ones who are the closed-minded ones because we don't believe that that's what happened, I think is really what it is. And when you were talking there for a second, Colby, it made me think of some quote from some guy, which you may have quoted a number of times, but it has to do with extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Who said that?
Sagan.
Yeah.
Okay, so not Christopher Hitchens, but I hit on a Sagan quote. All right. It makes sense, right? But when it comes to Mormonism, they make extraordinary claims. They don't even give average evidence. They don't even give the level of evidence that you would expect if it were not an extraordinary claim, if it were just an ordinary claim. That's how bad they're falling down.
Right.
Okay, any comments before we go to the next slide where I'm going to start adding a few things and some video clips of my own? Randall Bell, what do you think in Colby 2?
Well, I've said this before. When I teach critical thinking, the simplest way to think about critical thinking and hit 80% of it with just the simple concept of Aristotle, egos, logos, and pathos, and I added duos. So ethos, is it ethical? Is what's going on ethical? Is it logical? Is it pathos? How does it connect emotionally, and how does it kind of vibe? And then duos, have I looked at both sides of the story? And unfortunately, Mormonism is all pathos. It's all emotion. Now, that is one of the 4 categories. I'm not down on it. How do things feel? Because our emotions can, be very helpful in making smart decisions. But it's got to be tempered with logic. It's got to be tempered with ethics. And you got to look at both sides. And I did not see a theme of Austin 5 doing anything but pathos.
If you have one more category added in there, you'll have your own collective witness model.
Can I pull up one comment here? Someone asked me, how do I account for propositions that exist outside the human mind if they are intrinsically mind dependent? It's difficult for me to understand without a specific proposition the questioner has in mind. So if they can give me one, maybe I can better understand what they're talking about. But what this hints at to me is this problem of hard solipsism. You guys are familiar with the idea of solipsism, right? Like, how do you know you're not a brain in a vat? How do you know you weren't created 5 seconds ago with programmed memories? This level of
what is a solipsism, though? What's the definition?
Solipsism is the belief. I think it's I would have to look up the exact definition.
Looking it up, Captain.
Because I don't want to misstate it.
I can't see my freaking home keys here. Solipsism. Okay. It's the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. So sort of like Descartes.
Descartes, yeah. I think therefore I am. Yeah. This level of skepticism is just very silly to me, because how would you determine truth claims that exist outside the human mind if they are intrinsically mind dependent? What they're hinting at is, how can you rely on your sense data? How do you know you're not a brain in a vat? No one can solve this problem, theists included. You have to assume that we share a reality and operate from that assumption.
I suppose anything could be justified or harmonized or argued to be real if we're incapable of conceiving it or interacting with it with our mind. Is that what you mean? Is it a wood tool?
No, I'm saying that it is a form. When people ask this question, they are often doing it because they are trying to say you really can't know anything for certain. And that is true to some extent, right? The study of epistemology goes back millennia. It's very difficult to determine exactly how we know the things that we know. But we have learned throughout the course of our lives and throughout the course of human history, the way that we can make moves in the right direction. So it's just a silly question to me. When we start talking about this problem of hard solipsism, I cannot prove to anyone that I'm not a brain in a vat. I cannot prove that we're not in a simulation. I just don't find it a very useful thing to think about, in the sense that whether I am in a simulation or I am in a brain in a vat, it seems to me like I am sharing reality, at least on this screen, with the two of you right now. Whether the ultimate nature of that reality is a brain in a vat or a simulation, does it really fully matter? I guess is my question.
Well, I'll let you in on a secret, is that you are actually interacting with another human being, which is me. Of course, you could just be a projection of my mind.
Right.
That's the problem. Okay,
I think it'd be
so
more interesting if I was a projection of your mind.
oh, I don't know about that, Colby. I think it's interesting that our backgrounds tend to reflect the things that are of most importance to us, and Randy has books in his background.
Recently gotten out of storage.
Yes. I'll leave the other unsaid. I find it more effective that way.
You wouldn't be wrong, RFM.
So my favorite critical thing that he puts up there, this is one. Okay, let's see. Slippery slope. Assuming catastrophic results from a premise. This is actually from his book. Austin wrote this. All right. Let me see what it says up here. It's hard for me to read it because there's some other things in front of it. But it says, can you read that, Colby? It is dangerous to accept. That's what it is. It is dangerous to accept the doctrine of personal revelation from God. I got it now. It's just hidden a little bit behind the numbers and the people watching that's on my screen. It is dangerous to accept the doctrine of personal revelation from God. Before you know it, this is his example of this logical fallacy, right? Before you know it, we'll see criminals committing heinous acts claiming revelation from God. And then finally he says, it is a false idea meant to exploit the target's risk aversion. I just thought it was amazing that he gave that example considering recent history and even not so recent history in the Mormon church. So I've got some pictures up there of Ruby Frankie and Jody Hildebrand. We know about Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, and a couple of the Lafferty brothers who went to prison. All of them, well, at least some of them murdering people, and a couple of them on their way to murdering people and children as well. All of them involve children, though not just children, based upon the belief that they are getting revelation, personal revelation from God. And he says this as a logical fallacy. Before you know it, we'll see criminals committing heinous acts claiming revelation from God. Well, newsflash, Austin, they already are. Your thoughts?
Go ahead, Colby.
Yeah, if you have not dug into these cases or watched documentaries about these cases, I think it is fair to say that we obviously know that not everyone who believes in Mormonism is going to be like Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrand, the Vallows, or the Laffertys. But you cannot separate their crimes from Mormonism. They did these things because they believed that they were called of God to do them, because they believed they received personal revelation to do them. They're hooks in the overarching narrative, Nephi's slaughter of Laban while he's defenseless, that hook into these ideas and allow people to find these patterns inside of this system. So not all Mormons are going to go this direction, but what a weird thing for Austin to say, given contemporary events.
What do you think, Randy?
It was super, super weird. And I would just circle back to what I just said. This is all pure pathos, all emotion. When I worked on the Heaven's Gate case, I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating, that at the time I was working on it, I was a true believing Mormon. And I came across, went down to the police and got all the videos that the Heaven's Gate cult had videotaped. And I came across a thing where Doe, the cult leader in Heaven's Gate, the most notorious suicide cult in U.S. history, said, let me just tell you, the truth, and then go and pray about it. And number one, and he also says something very interesting, which I just heard in General Conference. Don't talk to unbelievers about this. Just, pray and just simply ask God and stay away from the lazy learners and lax disciples, in essence. It was the same formula that Mormonism uses, and it's not tempered with any kind of logic. It's not tempered with any kind of ethics. Illegal stuff is really, a bad idea. It was pure emotion, and they certainly were forbidden from getting both sides of the issue. So I see some striking parallels. I know that sounds really just unbelievable and hard to wrap your head around when you hear that for the first time, but these are just facts. And, I'm just glad Mormonism's in my rearview mirror. That's all I can say about that.
The Laffertys used Nephi's slaying of Laban, the story in the Book of Mormon, early on in the Book of Mormon, as a predicate and a justification for killing other people that God told them to. And in Lori Vallow's trial, the prosecutor introduced the jury in opening statement to be like Nephi and told them the whole story so they would understand what Lori was referring to in her text messages to others about stealing themselves. Now's the time we have to be like Nephi and we have to kill this person that God has revealed needs to die.
Yeah.
So, no, we're not making this up. We're not making this worse than it is. It's pretty darn bad. And yes, it's a minority of cases, thank God. And maybe they would have found a justification otherwise.
Right.
All I'm saying is that it's probably not a good idea to be making a slide like that.
Yeah.
And I think what it reveals is there's a disconnect there.
Right.
There's a disconnect of some sort, I think. Colby?
Right. No, I completely agree with you. I mean, who knows what these people would have hooked onto if it wasn't Mormonism. But my point is, you cannot separate their crimes from Mormonism. Like, they themselves think that Mormonism motivated their crimes. Lori Vallow did an interview with local news where she truly believes that Jesus is going to come back and bust her out of prison. Like, that's what she believes. So she is telling people like Austin Fife she did her crimes because of Mormonism.
She needs to really not look into the Lafferty brothers, because I think one of them's dead in prison by now. I think the other one's still alive, but the one who's dead, as well as the one who's alive, used to believe the same thing 40 years ago when they got put in, that Jesus was going to come or Elijah was going to come and bust them out. Well, he's taking his time, and I think he's going to take his time busting you out of prison too, Lori. Just saying. All right, so now we have this wonderful part of the show, okay? This is my favorite part. Because even though I could not induce Austin to come on the show to talk to us, nevertheless, the things that we were saying made him respond to them. He responded to some of the things that we were saying about him, the criticism we were giving of his book, and he ended up making it worse and worse for himself. That's what was so delightful about it. It was like quicksand. He keeps struggling to get out of the quicksand, and he keeps getting caught more and more in the quicksand, to where I made this particular slide, okay? Because this is what he says. When he gets caught making a bad argument or doing something wrong, what he did was he would say, not, oh, you have a good point, and I need to correct that, or you've misunderstood my point, and here's the evidence that supports what I said initially. No, instead he says, it's a trap. I meant to do that, and you fell into my trap by criticizing me for the bad arguments that I was making. So the next slide is, let me see if I can find this one. Yeah, it's a trap. And these all come from a particular episode that Colby and I did called How Mormons Lie to You. This deals not exclusively with, but largely with Austin Fife. We go off and we go after some other people. You know, the
this
usual
didn't
suspect
count.
Colby.
We didn't count this as one of the 20, right?
We didn't even count this as one of the 20, and I think we should. How Mormons Lie to You. Because this is where we talk about where Austin goes on to Psych Word Radio and talks, stuff and tries to defend himself, and they all agree with him, believe it or not. Now, this has to do with one of his arguments, okay, for the Book of Mormon, which is called the Narrative of Zosimus. And that's the timestamp up there, okay? The Narrative of Zosimus, which he put in his book, The Light on Truth letter, to support the Book of Mormon by saying there's this ancient document, although not ancient enough, as it turns out, but he doesn't get to actual dating because it doesn't help his argument. We understand, Austin. That's how it goes. But he's trying to show this old argument from Jack Welch from 40 years ago. I mean, I was doing the apologetic thing when it was first published by Farms. And it takes this old document and tries to make all these connections with First Nephi to try and show that the Book of Mormon is ancient and comes from the Near East, all right? We pointed this out. We blew that argument to the moon. And this is what he gets confronted about or confronted with on Psych Word Radio. And this is what it is that he has to say about it. So this is from 3107 to 3426. Okay, so here we're going to go. Listen to what Austin Fife now has to say.
Not like that's not what happened, guys. So, all right, next
now,
one.
A critique of the. Is this right?
He's reading a comment.
Oh, it is. Okay. In a thread entitled "Critique of the Narrative of Zosimus Evidence from the Light and Truth" letter, in the introduction it says,
So you can stop there. Here's why you can stop there. So this is essentially a thread on Reddit debunking one of my arguments about Zosimus having some parallels to Lehi's story and Lehi's vision. Here's the reason I wanted to post this one. This is like a little mini baby troll in the Light and Truth letter, and they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And I was so happy there's a thread. Here's why. I did not post this in the evidences section. So my argument is not, this is evidence for the Book of Mormon. What I did in the Light and Truth letter is I showed loose parallels are not evidence, right? Just because it says rod of iron and view the Hebrews does not mean that's the source for the Book of Mormon. It's a nonsense argument. And so at the end of that section, I say, look at all these parallels between Lehi and Zosimus, right? Why do critics not use this as a source for the Book of Mormon? So I'm using their logic against them to say, why don't you use this as a source for the Book of Mormon if that's the way you do your logic and your math? And they totally fell for it. I wasn't making the argument, this is the source. I was saying, I'm using what you guys do against you. And they totally fell for it. I was so happy to see this thread. It cracked me up.
Just went whoosh right over their head.
All right.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So it's a scholarly, here's why this cannot be the Book of Mormon and Lehi, and here's the timelines. This whole scholarly, debunking of the Zosimus argument. I'm like, wow, that's not even what I was trying to say. You fell for it.
Okay.
That's
So intelligent.
I'm sorry.
that,
So what was my reaction while I was watching this?
What
I'm
was
texting
your
the group.
reaction? You were texting me all caps angry messages. I had to chuckle for a second because Cardin's wife Brittany is on the stream and she flashed for a second and she had a really stern look on her face. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think it's because there's part of me that looked like she was processing what he's actually saying and is like, wait, what? You included a fake argument in your letter to listen to what he's saying. Take out his spin on it. He included a false argument that he doesn't believe in his letter to mislead people, to get people to respond to it. The thing I love about this too is you responded to the narrative of Zosimus argument and highlighted that it's not evidence of anything, which basically you came to the same conclusion that apparently Austin really held before he put it in his letter. But the thing I love about seeing Brittany's face is it's like, she seems like the only person with a brain of the four of them because she's recognizing what Austin is saying and had a stern look on her face as he was talking about it.
Isn't this fun going down memory lane?
It is. This is worse than a bad episode of Beavis and Butthead.
It's worse than I remembered it. What did you think, Colby? By the way, instead of playing the whole, it goes on and on for quite a ways, this evisceration of Austin. So I cut it up and tried to get the very best sound bites, and I've got 6 of them total. That was the first one. So we can follow it along as we watch him twist and turn in the wind.
I love it. Honestly, it was worse than I remembered also. I can't believe he admitted to this during a live stream and didn't, because his explanation since has basically been that we took him out of context and it isn't exactly the way we represented it. Well, we played his own words and he says it himself. It's that simple.
Can't hear you.
You're muted, sir.
Thank you for letting me know. So I'm going to the second slide here, unless you have something else you want to add to that. This is where it says the narrative of Zosimus was not included as a trap, LOL. Okay, so narrative of Zosimus not included as a trap, LOL. And let's see what this says. It's from the same show, but the timestamp is 34:59 to 35:29, so this is about half a minute. Over. And then he includes this evidence, and he treats it as an evidence. He doesn't say, by the way, this is the way that apologists argue, right? or this is the way critics argue, or anything like that. He presents it as an evidence. We blew it out of the water, and so did the people over there, apparently on ex-Mormon Reddit. And his response when his arguments get blown out of the water is to say, I meant to do that.
Yeah. Oh.
I meant to do that. It was a tour de force of bravado, and nobody called him on it.
Yeah, except for Brittany's face.
Yeah, Brittany's face called him on it. That was about it. That was the only pushback he got, was Brittany's face. Anything from you, Dr. Bell?
It just, my BS alarm went off. So, it pegged the red line. What can I say? It was so bad. As much as I dislike the arguments that come out of Midnight Mormons, it was so cringy. I actually felt bad for them because they've officially reached the bottom of the barrel.
Wow.
You can tell when they started hitting the bottom of the barrel, Randy, because that's when Jonah made his appearance onto their cast of characters.
Yes. Have I mentioned he's a thief? Have I mentioned you're a thief yet? Have you heard that, Jonah? You're a thief and you haven't denied it yet or issued an apology for stealing my research and that of Eldon Watson and God knows how many other scholars. Okay, now this is where Colby loses it on Austin. I was kind of surprised by this. Have you looked at these clips before tonight's show?
No, I'm
Okay,
reacting fresh.
I am glad to hear that because you're going to love this. Colby loses it on Austin, 39-22 to 41-15. It's as the enormity of what it is that he's doing, Austin's doing, finally sinks into Colby, and he has an emotional reaction. Let's watch.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here's the narrative of Zosimus from his letter. This is the past week. I went back to say, what is this? How did you present it? Because I sure thought you were presenting it as an argument. Of course he does. What he says is, the narrative of Zosimus is an ancient text written originally in Hebrew. Why is that important? Well, it sounds like an argument.
Mm-hmm.
It appears to be at least as old as the time of Christ and likely much older. Oh, so it's important to the Book of Mormon. Critics usually do not reference this text. Well, that's true. Apologists don't either. But the parallels to the story of Lehi are fascinating. Fascinating, interesting. He's doing it again. He's trying to present it as an evidence without presenting it as an evidence the way he does throughout his paper, so he doesn't have to assume the burden of proof. He now lists all the alleged connections and parallels between the letter of Zosimus and the Book of Mormon, which were originally in the paper written by John Welch about 40 years ago. And it continues. Here's the top one, or the bottom one at the top. This is the last part of his entry on Zosimus. Here's what he says. This is Austin 5 talking about the narrative of Zosimus. Critics may not Are you okay, Colby?
I didn't look at the letter again. This is.
Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read it
Okay.
since it's hitting you fresh.
Before you recap this, I just have to say this. Austin 5, you're a liar. This is a lie, and you are a liar. This is what liars do. You are a liar, sir. That's a lie. You lied, and we caught you in a lie. Do you have no shame? You're selling this book to people for money. This is absurd to me that they think God is on their side in this. This is a lie. He lied, and he admitted it. Oh,
okay. I'll read this part now. Now that you got that out of your system. So what I want to know, Colby, is do you think that Austin lied?
In that particular instance, I absolutely think he lied. And no, DG, this is a different shirt because it's a different color, but it's the same shirt.
Oh my gosh. Randy, what did you think about that explosive ejaculation from Colby?
I remember that episode. I thought, go, Colby, go. You're absolutely right, and every right to be furious. I call a spade a spade. It is what it is.
Very, very good. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on the stage this because I want to make sure that we did not skip this because this was his hasty generalization. We've talked about it, but I want to make sure we show it to the audience. Once again, it's this whole crazy receipts thing that I think is important, that you think is important, that we think is important over here, but not so much over there on the apologist side. He says a hasty generalization, once again, from his letter, Austin's letter, an inference is drawn from insufficient evidence, leaping to a conclusion, Oh, okay. Because we're going to talk about this here in a second, right? This is the one place where he talks about or references even the SEC scandal that the church had, and that became public in early 2023. And this is what he says about, hey, Randy, can you read what he says about it? This is his example of what a critic might say that would be a hasty generalization and hence a logical fallacy.
Sure. The church affiliated investment manager, Ensign Peak, was fined $4 million, and the church, meaning the Mormon church itself, $1 million for insufficient reporting of securities owned. In other words, they concealed and hid stuff. So the church is sketchy.
Is that a hasty generalization, do you think?
No, it's factual. I think it's actually very charitable towards the church because they're saying insufficient reporting when it was a fraud. It was a financial fraud.
That's exactly right,
ironically-
Randy. That's
I'm
what I
sorry,
was
Randy,
going
what?
That's exactly what I was going to say. It wasn't insufficient reporting. It was fraudulent reporting. They lied on federal forms. Federal forms that were created. One of the things that's so absurd about the apologetics on the SEC issue is the Securities and Exchange Commission was created in 1934 because of the Wall Street crash in 1929. Regulators like this exist to protect the public. The whole reason that 13Fs are required is because you are a large enough market mover at that level of transaction that you can affect the entire global economic market. So people have a right, our law has determined, our regulations have determined that people have a right to have access to that information. The church decided that they were above the law and did not want people to have access to that information. And they concealed that information for the express purpose of not giving people information that the law says they are entitled to. It was not insufficient reporting, it was fraudulent reporting.
Yep.
So here we get great points, by the way. Well said. This last thing in his book where he describes the logical fallacy is what really got me this time, where he says we all tend to take lazy shortcuts when we encounter new information. Do we all, Austin? Or are you applying what you do to everybody else subconsciously? He goes on, it is easier to write something off than to engage with the issue. And now it's going to get really deep. One or two more insights may address the concern. He says one or two more insights may address the concern, in which this is all he says about the biggest financial scandal the church has faced since Kirtland, Ohio in the 1830s. And in his book, this is all he says about it. And he completely does not mention it in his chapter that's devoted to financial issues with the church.
This
If
is
one
another,
or two more insights might address the concern, Austin, why don't you provide those one or two more insights is my question, Colby.
It's because he can't. This is exactly what I was talking about with my example of the street lamp puzzle. One or two more pieces may make this thing that looks exactly like fraud not look like fraud. That's what he's trying to do. That's what they do. They're always staving off the obvious conclusion, hoping that there's going to be some other piece of evidence that's going to come out that's going to completely change it. Nothing's going to change that. Like, it's a stipulated consent order that the church entered into and negotiated through working with the regulator. There's no additional insight that's going to change this.
Great point. Randy?
Well, the church finds itself as a result of the SEC thing and the other numerous things, but let's stick with the SEC, of committing a fraud, period, and being busted for it and not apologizing, which is official. I mean, it's as official policy doctrine, whatever you want to call it, as can be, because the guy running the show now, Dallin Oaks, has said repeatedly, we don't issue apologies. So you're just screwed when you take that position. You're caught committing fraud on one hand, and you won't say I'm sorry on the other. What reasonable adult or organization run by reasonable adults don't apologize when they, I wouldn't label that a mistake. I would label that as it's a fraud. And a mistake is a fart in the elevator. That's a mistake. But this is not a mistake. This is fraud, and they won't apologize. They're just certified screwed with that position.
Randy, I did apologize for that fart, that elevator.
And I forgive you.
Yeah, when I fart in an elevator, it's no accident. All right, so let's go to this clip. We've gone through 3 clips. Here's now this 3rd clip where the Light and Truth letter never addresses the LDS Church's SEC scandal. They're quoting me saying this. And then now this is where it becomes a trap, because he's going to call it a trap that he mentioned it in that piece that I just showed you, right? That we just talked about. That's the only mention in the entire book, 245 pages about the SEC scandal, not mentioned at all in the entire chapter that's devoted to financial issues with the church. And they quote me, and this is what Austin Fife has to say and why he put that in his book. So obviously, if it's not obvious, let me make it clear. I am talking in the very first episode I did. This is even before Colby. This is BC, okay? About church finances. And all I did was I looked at church finances. BK, I got it. Because I wanted to see how he addressed the church SEC scandal. It's the most recent, it's the biggest financial scandal that's ever been publicized about the church ever since Kirtland, ever since the 1830s. So it's a huge deal. He doesn't address it anywhere in there. And I'm talking about trying to find it. I couldn't find it. It turns out that you found, Colby, that he referenced it in chapter 1, but it's only in passing. And he uses it as an example of what he calls a hasty generalization. That if you think because the SEC fined the church or whatever, his church was fined, that obviously the church did something wrong. Yeah, who would come up with that idea? I got no idea. Obviously, when the SEC fines people, it's because it doesn't mean it doesn't mean they did something wrong. Okay. It usually does, I think, but not when it's the church getting fined. Anyway, that's what we're talking about. That's why they're playing me. And listen to how Austin responds to this, because guess what? It's another trap. Is a search function in the letter.
Oh, a search
and I
function.
put securities in there. Nope, nothing comes up. I put exchange in there. Nothing comes up.
You can actually pause it real quick.
Okay, pause it. Yeah.
Oh, maybe he might finish it, but ironically, it is sort of in the Light and Truth letter under manipulation and fallacies. I use it as an example of a hasty generalization where they say, because the church was fined, therefore the church is sketchy, false, bad, whatever. It's a hasty generalization. It's not necessarily one means the other. It just means that the church was fined, and we can have a discussion about that.
Apparently not.
So ironically, he said that it's nowhere in the letter. It is in the letter. It's under manipulation and fallacy. So it's kind of funny. He fell into
It's where you go from 1 to 11 with unjustified.
So do we keep playing this?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because it's just look. Okay, so
it's a red herring. It's right. I ask questions in this section that go completely unanswered, and then he uses a red herring to kind of distract from the issue. It's like, no, you don't understand. I'm asking the questions. Not you. I'm asking the questions.
And
that's the Light and Truth letter.
What he repeats over and
Oh my God! I'm asking the questions.
I'm
asking the questions. Oh, sorry. So when I criticize him for not addressing in his financial issues section relating to the church, the biggest scandal the church has had in the last 150 years, okay, almost 200 years. That's a red herring, apparently.
Yeah,
that's a red herring.
In the church finances section.
Yes, in the church finances section. And he doesn't address the issue in chapter 1. He uses it as an example of a hasty generalization without going into any facts. He gives it 2 sentences, right? As a hasty generalization to say, just because a government agency like the Security and Exchange Commission, after a years-long investigation, finds church leaders because they find that church leaders were involved in this violation of the law. And this violation of the law went on for 20 years, okay? That just because the church gets fined by the SEC, it doesn't mean the church did something wrong. That's what he calls a hasty generalization. So he never addresses the issue about the SEC fine in the letter. And that is a trap. Yeah, he called that a trap. I replayed it there only to show where he calls it trap, because there's some over talking at the end, but he says, yeah, he fell right into my trap by pointing out and finding fault with him not addressing the SEC violation in his chapter on financial issues or anywhere in his book except as that misleading example in chapter 1 that we reviewed before. That's the trap.
This goes back to a comment Randy made earlier in this episode. Every time Austin is having live conversations about these critical thinking, epistemological, logical fallacy type topics, it is so clear he has no idea what he's talking about. To say that that is a red herring demonstrates that you have no idea what a red herring is.
What do you think, Randy? Did you know there were so many traps in this book?
Say again?
Did you know there were so many traps in this book?
Well, yeah. Well, that's just so absurd. But I can just say this: I'm not Mother Teresa, but those are not my values. If those are their values, they can keep them, because the Mormon Church has a value system, and it compels its members to have a value system to say such certified USDA choice bullshit. And if you can't figure that out, then you deserve it, and there's more people that believe in Bigfoot. There's more people that believe in a flat earth than Mormonism. And we're just trying to tell the truth to the remaining 3 or 4 million members and let you decide on your own. But now that you've seen the evidence and you go for that, you deserve it. You deserve to give up your Sundays. You deserve to give away your 10%, and you deserve to take your brain and hand it over to 15 guys in Salt Lake that clearly are frauds.
Mic drop.
Chef's kiss there, Randy.
That's 2 there. You got as many mic drops as Austin has traps in his book so far. So let's see here. Now, we've got a couple more. This is the SEC scandal is a shallow thing. This is where he's justifying not addressing the SEC scandal. He calls it a shallow thing. So here it is. This is 57:28 to 59:06, so about a minute and a half. Now listen to this one.
It's kind of just a thing that I think he wants people interacting with the most negative things he can find about the church and the most recent negative things he can find.
SEC is a shallow thing. I try to go deeper and ask some real fundamental questions.
Like you mean past the open.
Okay, wait. There was a reaction from you when Austin said the SEC is a shallow thing.
Austin doesn't understand like any of the stuff he's talking about. When he calls something a red herring, it's not a red herring. Like we could look at the definition of what a red herring is. It's so absurd to me that we have all these bobbleheads nodding along and high-fiving each other. Like, how is there no sane person in the room? I guess it's a shame Brittany wasn't there to look askance at the camera for a minute, but how is there no sane person in the, like, if I was on a live stream with you and Bill and you were talking about this level of game playing with apologists, I would like to believe I would say something. And that's my other overall takeaway from this and Austin's effort is like, it's not what it purports to be. The title is The Light and Truth Letter, and we've now caught him in 2 examples that we've been able to track down of him knowingly putting false things in there according to his explanation, right? So he's either lying then or he's lying now in defense of the church, like in defense of the truth. Like, this is absurd that they think they're the good guys. Like, they need an Are We the Baddies moment really bad.
I think that lines up really well with what you said, Randy. If this is your value system, you're welcome to it. I don't have any interest in, breaking bread with people like that.
Yeah. And we think about it. We have the ability now that Mormonism is, behind us to just say what we really think and be honest. I mean, for the one true church, this joint sure has a hard time telling the truth and defending the truth. They wouldn't know the truth if it came and sat on their face. It's just so absurd. And now I'm starting to sound like you, Colby, because I'm going off. And, what can I say? But at least it's the truth, and I stand by it. And if they want to come out and debate and show me wrong, I will gladly apologize and go back to church. They can't do it because they don't have the truth. They're lying.
Any comments from you, Colby?
I got my comment in. No, Randy's
Okay.
killing it.
Yeah, and I'm not touching that line with a 10-foot pole, what he said.
We brought in the ringer, man.
We did. There's one more clip here, okay? One more clip. Did any of you think it was funny that he called the SEC scandal a light thing and that he likes to go deeper by ignoring it?
I cannot track his thought trains, unfortunately, or fortunately for me.
Well, he actually comes up with the third trap, believe it or not. So many traps, so little time. 59:52 to 1:02:14. Yeah. This is the last clip here, so enjoy it while we got it. I'll continue with this particular clip.
Please.
Opening page so you can pronounce the name right. You know what I'm saying? All right,
Yeah.
keep going.
And that's all I've really seen on Reddit, and so far the responses that I've seen online is it's using red herrings to distract attention away from the real questions that I'm asking, and so they fall completely on their face they fall right into the trap of the Light and Truth letter for the critics, because I asked some real questions that they can't answer or won't answer.
You know what they hate? They don't.
So we fall into the trap with the Light on Truth letter because we don't answer his inane questions. In other words, we deal with the substance of what he presents, we demolish it, and we fall into his trap because we didn't answer his questions. So, number one, when the Light and Truth letter doesn't mention an important issue like the SEC scandal, it's a trap. Number two, when the Light and Truth letter when it does mention an issue like Zosimus, but gets it horribly wrong and is exposed publicly by us and others, that's a trap too. And finally, number three, what we just saw is when we demolish the Light and Truth letter's arguments, but don't answer Austin's dumbass questions, well, that's another trap.
Admiral Akbar would be proud. One thing I was going to say is right at the end of that clip where you ended it, Jonah, the self-styled professor, says, "Do you know what they hate? Let me tell you, Jonah. I hate liars. I hate people who lie. I hate people who play games with people's lives." RFM and I have received emails from listeners to our series and who have read the Light and Truth letter, who it is affecting their marriage and it is affecting their life because they have a believing spouse that is using the Light and Truth letter against them like a cudgel to say, look at all these reasons to believe. And now that I know that at least some of those reasons are, according to Austin, a trap, they're not real. Like, do you understand why we care about this? Like, I hate liars and you guys are liars. Let's continue to improve it, shall we?
More than we already have? Yes, we'll gild the lily. Now we go to Jacob Hansen. And that's where we segue from Austin Fife and to somebody else who doesn't need to be mentioned anymore here.
But is also a liar, for what it's worth.
I know, you just really, really came out swinging on both of those. It reminds me of the best line in the third Indiana Jones movie, which I think is Nazis. I hate these guys.
That was great, man. That was so long ago. I forgot that we did get those emails from listeners talking about how it was being used in their marriage and affecting their marriage. And it's just so
This is actually why we decided we would do it, was because we were finding out that people were getting gifts of this book from well-meaning, faithful family members or spouses, and it was putting them in a difficult position. So we wanted to provide a resource. Randy, what did you think about Colby exploding on that?
Well, as you can just see, I can relate. I mean, this is infuriating. Unfortunately, I found out that the Mormon Church exploded. I was all in. I was that guy on the airplane that always carried a Book of Mormon in my briefcase to hand to the lucky person that happened to sit next to me.
Did you sit next to Mick Jagger?
I was ready for him. If he showed up, I was there. And, I had just sent 3 kids on a mission. I was about to send a 4th. I had paid a fortune into tithing. I invested, I did my whole career around being on church on Sunday. I was all in. And then out came this thing called the gospel topic essays, which were basically admissions that all the things that I had heard were anti-Mormon lies were, guess what? They were actually true. The Baptist minister on a rant down the street against Mormons, he was the guy telling the truth. My church was lying to me. I'm the wrong guy to lie to. I'm a nice guy, believe it or not, despite my rants tonight. But, it's infuriating. And, I could go on about major life choices I made. There's no way in hell I would have made had the church simply told the truth, what you are in the gospel topic essays, but they withheld that information for decades of my life. So I think we have every right. Colby has the right. I have the right. You have the right. Everybody listening has the right to be pissed, and if you're pissed, be pissed. I don't want to live my life pissed. I've largely processed it, which you probably never guessed from tonight. But, there are periods where this comes back, and then you hear these Beavis and buttheads trying to call things red herrings and mistakes and not take any credibility or any responsibility, and are so profoundly dishonest. I'm just simply not amused. I could go on, but I'll sound too much like Colby.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I think a lot of people were thinking you were amused. So,
can I share RFM? I did get
why
permission.
I do this, Colby.
Oh.
I want to hear what you want to share. Do you know why I do this? When he says red herrings, because that's the hand gesture that I don't know. It's like he needs some Skelligro in his right hand, because there's just nothing going on there when he does the red herring thing. Okay, Colby, what do you want to share? I'm sorry.
I shared this with at least you, RFM. I can't remember, Randy, if I shared it with you already. I got a message like literally just a few days ago from a listener to this series that I got their permission to share. I'm not going to share their name, but just their message. It goes exactly to what we're talking about. Hi, Colby. I don't know if you will see this or not. I just wanted to send you a message of gratitude. I have been a Mormon all my life. Grew up in the town that they grew up in. I'm not going to share that. Went on a mission, taught seminary, whole 9 yards. I went to law school and have been practicing now for a number of years. Anyway, post law school, I began to consume faithful content on YouTube, Ward Radio, Jacob Hansen, Austin Fife, etc. Their arguments did not hold up at all. In fact, their content was so bad, it made me question my testimony. Their arguments and conclusions had exactly the opposite effect on me and led to my questioning. This indirectly led me to finding RFM's page, where the two of you took apart the Light on Truth letter together. It was so refreshing to hear your take, and then they note a few different arguments that resonated with them. This is the point of why it's irresponsible for these guys to behave the way they did. So yes, I'm probably a little bit softer than I was when we recorded that clip, but it's not because I don't feel as condemnatory towards them. They should be ashamed of themselves. If they were capable of feeling that, they probably would. But it doesn't seem like they are. But they are playing games with people's lives. And that's not right. It's not right to troll people and trap people to stay inside of this church. People should have the right to make that decision for themselves based on the best information. And Austin is not sharing the best information.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, we are almost at the end of tonight's show, just so everybody knows. And then we talked about your favorite fallacies or arguments from the response series. There's going to be a place in here where we're going to invite people to call in and share whatever it is they want. Perhaps Randy will substitute for that. If you want to come in and let us know, that would be fine. But I only say it so reluctantly because we're at 2:28:34 in the show that was supposed to end 28 minutes and 38 seconds ago. Are you doing okay, Colby?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. If you're sure that you are. Because there are a few other things. You had included some Amazon and Goodreads reviews of the book.
Yeah, and I'll only share these in case anyone wants to join while we wait for people. Can you post that in the chat, the live chat, RFM, so that people have a link to it? I've posted it, but I'm not sure it shares to both shows at the same time.
Well, the answer to that is hell if I know, but let me see. Probably not.
You're going to want to...
I can do it in one. I can do it probably what'll be the most roundabout way of doing it. So go ahead and you can talk about that review, and I'll see about getting this link posted.
I think I just pulled together a bunch of 5-star and 1-star reviews from Amazon and Goodreads about the Light and Truth letter that I thought were funny in case we didn't have anyone call in. I just thought this one was funny. Many of the arguments aren't the strongest, but the author never claims they are anything more than just interesting questions that help guide his own journey. This book is worth it just for the extensive amount of resources linked throughout. So you bought a book because of the extensive amount of resources that link you to arguments that aren't the strongest. 5 stars. Got it. 1 star, very poorly researched and written. It is clear the author is a freshman apologist who has not engaged with these topics with any academic rigor. If anyone is hoping to give this book to a doubting family member or friend, please only do so if your hope is to drive them away from the LDS faith. Nothing is worse for a doubter than poorly constructed apologetics. And this one really cracked me up because it has a reference to you and I, RFM. 1 stars, more appropriately titled Light on Truth Letter. For a 58-hour chapter-by-chapter commentary on the logical fallacies, poor research, and motivated reasoning in this book, please Google Radio Free Mormon, Colby Reddish Light and Truth Letter. The book states that it is written as a response to the critic of the church, but it is written as confirmation bias to the believer, not as an honest engagement of the facts with the critic.
I really wish I could have appreciated that, but I'm too busy cocking up the link.
That's
so
okay.
Let me see here. I have it copied, and then something else happened, and I don't know what the hell's going on.
That's okay. Let me just read this last one, and then maybe we'll get Randy's closing thoughts, your closing thoughts, and we'll get out of here. Yeah.
Let me see here if this works. Okay, now there's a link. Now that link should work.
Okay.
Pay no attention to the first link, okay? The second link should work. So
This
what do
one-
you think, Randy? Or I'm sorry.
This one gave me a good chuckle. Senior primary level, 1 star. A friend gave me this book to help me answer my gospel questions. How do I get their money back? Osmond's gospel knowledge and intelligence is somewhere around senior primary level, and my copy of his book didn't come with crayons or blank pictures to make it complete.
Wow, that's great. I think the senior primary level is actually a compliment.
Yeah. 5 stars. Lighting the darkness. Wonderful debunking of disinformation and deceptive tactics used by the critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One thing that was really interesting to me as I was looking at these and pulling together a bunch of 5-star reviews, not a single one that I saw mentioned anything outside the first chapter. Every single one of them just talked about how the Light and Truth Letter takes the fight to the critics and exposes their disinformation and deceptive tactics, which, of course, if those individuals had continued to read through the book, they would be surprised to find Austin engages on roughly several times a page. So,
good point. So then there's kind of like a secret quiz book. Randy, are you able to read that? Is that large enough for you to read?
The secret quiz book. Oh yeah, I can read it. The author lays out a section on logical fallacies in an attempt to show the reader how antis or non-believers will use fallacious arguments to somehow get members to have doubts in the truth claims of the LDS Church. But in an apparent misstep, he actually educates the reader with knowledge to dismantle a vast amount of the forthcoming information in the book. It is ripe with the very fallacy he warns the reader about. It's almost like a fun Where's Waldo logical fallacy challenge. But usually Waldo is right in the center of the page, staring the critical thinker right in the face. The LDS Church has been involved in plenty of scandals since its inception in the early 1800s. Sexual scandal, racism, bigotry, financial fraud, etc. What about polygamy? Anyway, the author chooses to completely leave out and child abuse, which you want to see me flip cars. That should be added there too. The author chooses to completely leave out much of the information, which is a major problem when addressing reasons to either stay or leave a religious organization that claims moral authority.
Awesome.
Very good. Well worded. Kind of like a secret quiz book indeed. What were you going to say, Colby?
I think we had someone join us, RFM.
Yes, we did. And I was just going to bring him in. It could be, how are things in Mongolia? You know, hang on a second here. There we go. I think that if Diamond Dave, I keep trying to put him on. Are you trying to put him on?
I tried to help you and I took him off. Sorry. There you go.
That was all Colby's fault, Diamond Dave. I just want you to know that. If Diamond Dave had I don't know, if he had a talk channel, talk podcast, you could call it Yak Talk.
I probably should. Apparently, I'm an anarchist in the chat, which weird.
I feel like
I don't know. I've actually thought
saw you yesterday.
Yeah, I know, right? It's been a journey. It's been
Also,
a
if you
journey.
RFM, if you had a yak-based podcast, it would obviously be named Yakety Yak. Come on, it's
Don't
right
talk
there.
back.
Yeah,
Colby, don't talk back.
Puns.
I finally got into where you were yesterday, and now you're in tomorrow. Once again, you're still calling from the future. Is it March 8th over there?
It's March 8th, 12:35 p.m.
Well, it's good to know we haven't blown ourselves up yet.
Yeah, not yet. Wait until tomorrow. We'll just take it day by day.
We can go to sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that the world has not blown up by March 8th.
Yeah, your side. Yeah, our side of the world hasn't anyway. Don't know about yours, but we'll find out. But so the thing is, and I've called in on a couple of these shows because I have a lot to say about Austin Fife's Light and Truth letter. And one of the things is, and Colby brought this up, is this book allegedly is intended to help people because Austin Fife allegedly had a faith crisis. But he has a faith crisis and he wants to help people, so he puts traps in his book.
Clever plan.
I know, right? And it's like, I was legitimately thinking, like, dude, someone's going to get hurt by this. Like, someone's going to, like, there's going to be people who are genuinely seeking answers. And then they're going to, find him on Ward Radio and be like, oh, yeah, that was a trap. And, oh, yeah, I was trolling there, And you're not going to be able to really take it seriously, which is kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing I wanted to bring up yet again, because there's the overall theme of how poorly written it was and the lack of like authenticity and historical basis to the book, right? It still blows my mind to this day that apologists like Austin Fife of the one true church of Jesus Christ are held to a lower standard than I am as a gaming YouTuber.
it is crazy when you put it like that, Dave.
I actually brought that up with RFM, and I wanted to get Colby and Dr. Bell's kind of thoughts on that angle, because I brought this up before, and like, they don't get any pushback when they make a mistake. I have an audio mistake, or if I do a narrative about a video game, right? Something that's just recreational, and I get something wrong, I will be destroyed in the comments, even if it's like an accidental mistake. If it was overt lying, your channel's gone. You have no channel because you have no following. And that's just entertainment recreationally. It's not the one true church of Jesus Christ. It just blows my mind they're held to such a low standard.
What do you think about the dichotomy, Colby, and then Randy, about the different standards that people are held to?
Well, I was just going to talk about, actually, the first project you and I ever did together, RFM, was a series, just an audio series we did called like Mormonism and the Rules of Evidence, or Mormonism in the Legal Field, something like that. And we were doing kind of the same analysis you're doing, Dave, with what you spend time doing. And we were looking at comparing like what the rules of evidence can teach us about church history. And it's just so absurd to me that really whatever standard you pick, unless it's the internal standard, apologetics for Mormonism are going to fail. They're going to fail literally any standard. There is no floor unless you're setting it by Mormon apologetic standards. That's the only way they can like continue to do this. And you're right. It's absurd to me that they think they're defending the truth. They think they're the bad guy, or they think they're the good guys while they're engaged in this type of behavior. Dr.
It does
Bell.
strike me. it's a bit strange, and I want to hear what you have to say about it, Randy. But it's strange that what would seem to be the more serious subject being discussed, i.e., your eternal salvation versus gaming, right? That the
Mhm.
more serious the subject is, the less stringent the requirements are that you be accurate or honest with your audience. What do you think, Randy?
Well, Dave, I think you've made a brilliant insight. I mean, I'm not trying to virtue signal here, but if I did this kind of stuff in my business, I wouldn't have a business. I get FBI clearances probably twice a week. I'm literally fingerprinted. I don't know, at least once a year, maybe more. And you just don't lie in the business I'm in. You don't lie. I mean, all morality and all of that aside, you just don't lie because you trash your reputation, you trash your credibility, and it's over. And yet that seems to be the game plan. And you're right. We live lives that are far more credible, far more ethical, far more logical than the church we once thought was the one true church. I think it's just a brilliant observation. And I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but it doesn't, that all being said, it doesn't take an awful lot to have more integrity than the Mormon church has, if we really know what we're talking about.
Well, exactly. And I fully agree. And I mean, even like in something like, because my field now, because I used to be in banking and it would be the exact same thing, right? Banking and finance, exact same thing. But even in my field now, as just a content creator, right? I mean, there was one point where I lost some followers and some of my videos didn't do well, not because I lied intentionally, but because the thumbnail and the title did not match the content of the video as well as it could have. And a bunch of people were like, oh, no, we're not watching this guy at all. Right. And it just, I mean, it's gaming and you can always find new viewers. Right. But I would think, like Dr. Bell said and Colby said, like, your eternal salvation and families being together forever, that's much more important than, me just ranting on a YouTube live stream and like guns and explosions, right? But and so it's like there's no accountability within the church to refine the arguments, because I've seen other denominations of like Christianity and Catholicism, which I generally don't get along with, and like with those groups of people. But I mean, I can respect the fact that if a pastor or a Catholic priest, someone of a different denomination, if they were to do this, everyone would go after them. There would be like some internal mechanism within that system to try and put in accountability, but there's just none in the Mormon church for some reason.
Yeah, and contrast that to the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not Catholic, but you got to respect that the Pope came out and apologized for various serious mistakes, and he didn't sugarcoat them and call them mistakes. It was child abuse, and he went through a whole list of apologies, and it seemed to, at least to me, to be very sincere. I can accept people, who own up and accept that they screwed up and apologize. I can respect that, but I can't respect an organization as I said earlier, the organization itself is so sketchy, and then they compel their members to keep to do the stuff that Austin Fife is doing. In a way, Austin Fife is prey, and the 15 guys in Salt Lake City are predators, and nothing less than that. It's a predator-prey dynamic, and yet I think we need to give a little credit where it's due. We're trying to live principled lives. I mean, I know RFM and Colby well enough to know that they're principled people. You ask them a question, and you may or may not agree. Generally, I do. But the answers they give are honest, truthful answers. And, all the kidding about Beavis and Butthead aside, this is serious stuff. They do real damage with this predator-prey dynamic, at some level, I feel sorry for Austin Fife because he's so obviously wrong. But I don't feel sorry for the 15 guys that perpetuate this stuff and refuse to apologize.
Yeah, and that would be kind of my angle. My only thing is that I agree to a point, because when I first heard about the Light and Truth letter, I was still kind of like hanging out with Ward Radio way back in the day, right? And so it's like, okay, I kind of want to see this guy's angle because I left due to a faith conflict. And it's like, all right, so he wrote a book, he asked questions, this is his story. And I was kind of sympathetic to that, right? He wrote a book about his personal experience, and whatever happens, happens. But as I saw the book being played out by Colby and RFM, it wasn't so much his personal story as it was like basically regurgitated faith matters, scripture plus type arguments with questions at the end be like, we may not know the answer to this, but wouldn't it be cool if it's true? And I'm just like, what is the function of this book? Like, what are you trying to do with this book? And now that there's like traps in this book, that's even more harder for me to sympathize with him, because not only is there no cohesion to the book, but now there's an intent to mess with people in the book.
And that's if we believe him.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And that's if we believe him. But this was all intentional. The book didn't just vomit itself into existence. He sat down, he wrote it, he revised it. He wrote, he claimed that he spent, late nights.
Well, at least he wrote it. I don't know about the revision.
But, who knows? But it's like this is like intentional. And so it's like, if there's no cohesion in the intention, why should we trust the intention?
You're right, Dave. And the thing we got to remember is just how frightening and dangerous this is. What regardless of what Austin Fife's intentions are, you go back to that Amazon listing. The scary thing is it has a 4.8 rating overall. And I write books, and let me tell you, that's a very high rating. So he's conning a lot of people and pacifying, because the average member of the church by now knows that something's kind of got to be up, but he's pacifying them where they can say, well, that's all been debunked, without digging in at any level. So Austin Fife, 4.8, he's winning at some level, but you keep punching through the best you can.
That's kind of interesting because, and I don't know if this is a generational thing or just maybe a perspective thing. In my anecdotal experience, reviews mean nothing, right? Of people my age and younger, we do not look at reviews. We do not care about reviews because there are businesses where you can pay bots to hyperinflate your review. Yeah, exactly. Like, paid bots exist, right? And so it's like, you do have a valid point because there are people that will see it. But I also wonder, how legit is that 4.8 review? I'm not accusing him of anything, but I'm saying people will pay to inflate the reviews. So if we can't trust his book, why should we trust the review?
Maybe the reviews are a little bit like missions. The people pay to leave the good reviews for the Light and Truth letter.
No.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Great comments.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, we are almost 2 hours and 50 minutes into this 2-hour episode. So I see nobody else who's joining us. So let's close this thing out. And I'm going to give some final word time to Colby and Randall Bell. I'll give it to Randy first, and then Colby, and then I'll take us out. What do you say?
Well, thank you. I think our community, our tribe, and we're all in this together. I think we may have landed in different places post-Mormonism, but I think the common denominator that unites us is a desire to do a better job at being a more principled person than we ever did in Mormonism. And the snarky side of me wants to say, and that's not real hard to do, but the fact is that's what we're really trying to do. I left the Mormon Church because it did not meet my values, and I don't mean to sound like Mother Teresa, but those are some pretty sketchy and frankly dangerous values. So I think our tribe, our community owes you RFM and owes you Kobe, a lot of gratitude, because as I said from the get-go, 62 hours of content, that's a lot of research. I mean, I do an episode once in a while and it just takes, I put in, a few hours here and a few hours there, but it adds up to do that. So that's a Herculean effort. And I just want to end by my comments by just saying I'm grateful and thank you. I personally got a lot out of it, and I hope you feel the love and gratitude that so many people feel for your efforts.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. And thank you, Gigi, whose comment was displayed on the board there a second ago, I think by Colby. I think Gigi should meet DG. It's a match made in heaven.
Thank you, Randy. That was very kind. 62 hours was a lot of work. I can tell you, too, probably pretty conservatively, 62 hours of recording, what would you guess, RFM? We probably would do about...
8 times at least. I'd say 8 times for me, maybe 5 times for you.
That's what I was going to say. No, I just thank you for being here, Randy, and for breaking down kind of the conclusion of this with us and looking at kind of a retrospective on some interesting data points. I had so much fun doing this series with you, RFM. I am not reading this second book. You could not pay me to read this second book.
No, not enough money in the world to pay me to read another sentence written by Austin Fife's computer.
But, I think there's value that we find in life of having done things that were hard and difficult, that if we had known how difficult they were when we set out to do them, we probably wouldn't have done them in the first place. There's something special about moments like that. And that's how I feel.
Heading to Mordor with the ring.
Exactly. One does not simply review the Light and Truth letter, is what you're really saying, RFM.
Yes.
But no, I had a blast with this episode, and just with this series in general. So thank you for letting me be a part of it with you.
Well, thank you for forcing me to do it. It wouldn't have happened without you. I did the first chapter and I thought I'm done because I just showed this whole book is a bunch of malarkey if it's not going to address the SEC scandal in the chapter devoted to financial issues. But then you came a-calling and you had roses and they were red and they smelled so sweet. And I said, I'll do anything you want me to do, Mr. Rando. All right. Well, I think that's it then. I should say something here. It has been a long ride, but it's been a very enjoyable ride. And I agree with what you said, Colby, that it's let's put this up here on the screen, shall we? Let me see if I can do that, since I'm kind of the one in charge of all this. This is what you had written somewhere. Can you read that from there, Colby?
Yeah, I wrote this on the last, on the conclusion episode. I wrote, throughout this rather lengthy series, I have found that the real light and truth were the friends we made along the way. So thank you, everybody, for joining us throughout this very long series. I've had a blast, and I do feel that way.
And I have too, although I don't feel that way. But seriously, folks, seriously, it's been great to do this. Lord knows we probably won't do the like again, but this stands as a testament. And anybody who wants to hear the other side of the story of what it is that Austin Fife is talking about in his book, it's readily accessible at Radio Free Mormon, and you can go through them and you can find out what the real story is, the truth behind this crazy mirage that Austin Fife is trying to thrust upon you about how science and archaeology and linguistics and everything else in the world testifies that the Book of Mormon is true, as long as you don't look at the evidence. So please hit like, please hit subscribe. If you haven't yet, could you go to radiofreemormon.org and make a donation today? That would be so great. I would appreciate it. It is your donations that keep Radio Free Mormon broadcasting behind enemy lines. So thank you all for all of your support, for all of those of you who do make donations, for those of you who can't make donations but watch anyway and share this with friends and family, much to their delight and yours. Thank you so much for all of that. I'm just having the time of my life, and I'm glad that I could live long enough to see this happen and make such great friends as I have found in Colby and Randy and pretty much everybody in the live chat and beyond. Thank you so much. We'll see you on Monday at 6:00 p.m. Mountain Time for the Mormon newscast. And beyond that, I think you know the schedule. So thank you so much. We'll see you later. And good night, everybody. Please have a great second Saturday tomorrow.